I swear to God I'll never hear long, cool woman in a black dress again without thinking of that rocking chair. Songs have this effect on people. We associate certain songs with certain moments in our past. You see, it was Maloof made by Sam Samaloof before he died, and it cost my old man $20,000 over 20 years ago. Rocking chair, you say? Hell yes. But it's more than a rocking chair. It's a damn complete work of art in Claro walnut, all hand sculpted with smooth joints and damn comfortable to sit on. Oh yeah, and it was the only thing worth anything that rotten bastard of a father left me, but I still liked it. So I walked into my Brentwood mansion and heard the stereo blaring. The opening arpeggios with bells and echoes lead into pulsating power chords that lead into vocals. Great arrangement, which is harder than most people realize. This isn't quite my cup of tea, but it's still a great arrangement. I stopped and listened to the lead vocals, heavy reverb in the voice, which made it difficult to understand the text. Saturday night, I was downtown working for the FBI. I followed the music, throwing my jacket over the back of the couch before turning into the living room at the back of the house. It had been a long day at the agent's office trying to negotiate the terms of a new record deal, and all I wanted to do was sit in my chair, have a beer, and maybe see if Tara was ready for a change. She always became bitchy before filming the new season, and we didn't make love for almost 2 weeks. I walked into the living room and froze. Tara was ready, that's for sure. And there she was, in my Maloof chair, naked. She cheated on me with my bandmate Carl. Well, what will you do? I suppose I could attack them, but that would just land us all on the cover of every newspaper, tabloid, and crap magazine for the next year. Besides, I couldn't afford to hurt my hands or Carl's, for that matter, otherwise the band would be in deep shit in the middle of our new recording negotiations. So I didn't do anything. He simply turned and walked into the bedroom at the end of the hallway. I was buttoning a fresh shirt when I saw Tara's reflection in the mirror. "Where are you going?" she said, avoiding meeting my eyes. I tried to smile, but I couldn't. Instead, I just stared at her for a minute. Tara Boyd, a teen idol, has now become the glamorous and beautiful star of one of the highest-rated shows in television history, My Wife, My Life. Now, apparently, neither one nor the other. "We didn't want this to happen," she said, sitting on the bed and watching me rummage through the huge closet. Finally, I found a large duffel bag and started filling it with shoes, jeans, pants, and shirts. Once it had enough stuff in it, I dragged the bag back into the bedroom to the dresser, where I began throwing my underwear and socks into the little space that was left. "This is all," Tara said. "You won't even say anything?" I ignored her. I never thought about how I would feel if something like this happened to me, but the few times I thought about it, I was sure I would go crazy. But it's strange that I didn't get off. On the contrary, I just felt tired and depressed. The wind blew out of my sails, and I suddenly and inexplicably found myself adrift. "Damn it, Nick, say something," she screamed at me. "What the hell do you want me to say?" I exploded, pushing the bag to the floor and turning to her. "Is there a guide somewhere on how to deal with the fact that out of the blue one of your old friends and your wife are lovers, Tara? Huh? Well, what should I say? What do you want me to say? Damn, take it, you could leave some hints that this is happening, prepare me at least a little for me to stumble upon it, you know?" And that was all. All my energy disappeared again, and I just wanted to crawl away somewhere and die. So I dragged my bag past Tara and down the hall, stopping in the bathroom to collect my toothbrush and shaving supplies and other such odds and ends. Everything packed, I dragged the bag into the garage, threw it in my Escalade, and returned to the house. Carl was sitting in a rocking chair, lacing shoes when I entered. "Listen, Nick," he began, but I didn't want to hear it. "I just want my chair," I said. He jumped out of it, rushing out of the way. I lifted my chair and nodded towards the 9 Grammys and the stack of decorated platinum, multi-platinum, and diamond albums in the display case. "You and Tara will pack my things, okay?" "Where are you going?" he said. "Nick, you're the negotiator, dude. You're not going to leave, are you?" "Send everything to my mom's house," I continued, ignoring him. "I'll make all the preparations from there." I dragged the chair to the Escalade, put it in the back seat next to a couple of guitars that had already been stowed there a few days ago, and went to get into the car. "Nick," Carl begged, "please let me explain." I lowered my head, counting to 10. "We didn't want this to happen," he continued. "I mean, you should have been in negotiations all day, dude." I stared at it. "So what didn't you want to happen? Sleeping with her, or for me to catch you?" I didn't wait for his answer, preferring to jump into my car and drive away as quickly as possible. I was now 3 hours away and over 250 miles west of the City of Angels. Let this whole rotten city fall into the ocean. Okay, not all of it, just Brentwood. "Where are we going?" he said. His voice was rough, the result of 40 years of 3-pack-a-day habits. "Home," I said, not bothering to look at him. "Home to Brentwood." Home, I said. "Home to Grant City." "But you don't live there anymore," he said. "Yeah, well, shit happens," I said. "Things change." "So that's it?" he grinned. "Just packed up and ran? Give up?" I said nothing, and he also remained silent for about 30 miles. "They're all like that, you know," he finally said. "Not everything," I objected. "No," he agreed, "only the ones you choose." I nodded. He was right. "Why do you think so?" He laughed. It was a deep, raucous laugh that ended in a crackling cough. "Because you're a shallow bastard, that's why." "Well, congratulations," I said. "Looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." "Go to hell." I sighed. This was getting us nowhere, and I knew it would soon lead to another fight, and he would disappear. It's strange, but I wanted his company for a while. We were silent for about 10 miles before I turned to him. He looked the same as always. Thick gray hair with a thick beard, all of it slightly, but only slightly, needed trimming and combining. Thick, heavy features, large chest and arms protruding from the sleeves of his flannel shirt. I could almost reach out and touch it, but I knew my hand would go right through it. However, I could always detect a faint odor from him, a mixture of cigarette smoke and Lagerfeld cologne. "You know," he finally said, "you should have kicked his ass." "And what would that do?" "He would know not to do it again." "Oh, for God's sake, Walter," I said. He knew he shouldn't have done it from the start. And so did she. But that didn't stop either of them, right? Walter shrugged. "Yes, probably, but it would be easier on your soul than just leaving with your tail between your legs." "Yes," I replied. "Then my hands would be too damn swollen to play, the tabloids would go crazy, and they'd still be sleeping with each other in my damn chair." "My chair," he said. "I made it." "Yes, but now you're dead," I said, "so now it's mine." He turned and looked out the window, watching the desert night rush past us at 80 miles an hour. "You're probably right," he said. "I'd kick his ass anyway." We were approaching the junction from Interstate 15 to Interstate 70 when my cell phone rang. It was almost 11, and I had been on the road for almost 8 hours. The mobile phone brought me out of the monotony, and I realized that I was starting to get tired. Looking at the display, I decided to answer. "Hey, John," I said to our lead guitarist. "Nick, where the hell are you?" he said. He was screaming, and I could hear the loud noise of some nightclub in the background. "In Utah," I said. "What the hell are you doing in Utah?" "I'm on my way." I heard John shout to someone else, then went back to the phone. "Nick, you need to come back. You're our main man, and we're close to a big deal." "Let Ethan handle it," I replied. Ethan Rose was our manager, and he made enough and had a big enough share of the outcome to get through this without our help. "Dude," John whined, "you know he can't do it without you. They want to know what we have planned, what we have in the pipeline. Ethan can't handle this. Only you can, man." "Let me think," I said, and closed the phone before turning it off. We formed Leadfoot when I was a sophomore at Grant City High School. There were 4 of us: Teddy Cooper on lead guitar, Carl Simpson on bass, Vince Diamond on drums, and myself on rhythm guitar and lead vocals. The other three sang harmonies, and we had a sound similar to the Eagles. Halfway through our junior year, Teddy discovered alternative country rock. I will never forget the day I walked in on him and walked into his bedroom. Dual vocal harmonies sounded over plucked acoustic guitar and drawing country like slide leads. "Who is this?" I said, instantly loving it. "Jayhawks," he said, his eyes glued to the lyric sheet. "This is amazing," I commented. He simply nodded. For the next 3 hours, we listened to Hollywood Town Hall over and over again. To this day, I think about that day every time I hear Two Angels. The very next day, Teddy and I started writing our first song. It was surprisingly fast, at least the music was. It wasn't so easy with the lyrics. Then Teddy decided to start reading more serious things, poetry and Shakespeare, the Bible, and all sorts of other nonsense. It inspired him, he said, and he was right. Very soon we were composing lyrics left and right and music for them. Then I started reading all of this too. Very soon Teddy returned to concentrating on the music and only occasionally helping with the lyrics. The summer after high school, Leadfoot won a talent contest at the Lincoln County Fair, which earned us a trip to the Illinois State Fair. There we found ourselves surrounded by ballet dancers, jugglers, magicians, and several aspiring musicians, and we performed 3 songs with tight harmonies. When it was over, there was no doubt that the crowd was on our side. Let's be clear, when 50-year-old farmers and their wives are stomping their feet to teenage music, you're on to something. The crowd visibly booed when our second place was announced, behind some cute little girl tap dancing. Anyway, after the show, some 30-year-old guy in trousers, hair gel, and shiny jewelry came up to us. His name was Ethan Rose, and he was a talent scout for Harmony Records. They were looking for something new, he said, and asked if we wanted to meet some people. We wanted to, and we spent the next 3 weeks before starting our college classes auditioning in Nashville and Memphis. A month later, deep into our first semester at our different colleges, Ethan contacted us with an offer for a recording contract. That's when the problem started. Teddy decided he didn't want to stay in the group. He believed that we would become puppets for the music industry, selling out for money. I told him it was nonsense, and indeed it was nonsense. In fact, Teddy was simply afraid of failure on tour and did not want to risk the good things he already had. He was always the smartest of us and studied on a full academic scholarship. He didn't want to be a superstar, he wanted to be a teacher. So he left and Ethan set about finding a replacement for us on lead guitar. Over the Christmas holidays, Carl, Vince, and I flew to Memphis to begin rehearsals and auditions for a new lead guitarist. With Ethan's help and pressure from the record company, we settled on our first choice, John Bauma. John was 4 years older than us, but boy did he play guitar. He'd been a studio musician for the past 3 years, some teenage prodigy looking for the right gig, and the record company thought he'd be an easy fit into Leadfoot. They were right. It helped that he also had a nice tenor voice and could help me with songwriting. He was terrible at writing lyrics, which fell entirely on my shoulders. Carl and Vince were happy to just play their instruments and sing when asked. You know the rest. Our first album, Somewhere Down Highway 66, went multi-platinum. We then escaped the second album slump with Plain States, our first, and to date, only diamond album with over 13 million copies sold. A few subsequent albums came up to that level, but basically we've continued to ride the wave of our first 2 efforts for the last 6 years. And here we are in the middle of negotiations for a new recording contract. Harmony had sold our contract a long time ago, and Columbia wanted a 5-album deal. We were profitable, but they wanted guarantees that we wouldn't fizzle out halfway through the contract. That's where I came in as the main person. The band needed to prove that we had a solid pipeline of songs that would sustain us for a while, and I was the logical choice to do that. The problem was that we didn't have a lot of good songs. Of course, we had a lot of mediocre ones, and just putting our name on them would probably have sold several million copies of at least the first few albums. But we stagnated, and I knew it. The other guys, including Ethan, didn't want to hear it. Oh no, they were all chirping. Just sell it to them. We will make money on this, and we'll be in chocolate. Unfortunately, Colombia saw this stock for what it was, and they negotiated harder than any of us expected. So here I was, trying to save the band, provide them with all these bags of money, and surround them with amazing fans who would please them before, during, and after the show. And what kind of gratitude do I receive for my efforts? I get criticized all the time, and Carl sleeps with my wife. What a thank you. After checking into the hotel, I carried my bag into the room, plugged my phone into the charger, turned on the air conditioning, and collapsed on the bed. I'm sure I was asleep before my head hit the pillow, and my dreams were long and restless. All featured Tara in various roles, few of them good. The phone started ringing, and again, and again, and again. This is where I woke up. I shivered as the air conditioning cooled the sweat pouring down my face and shirt. Shaking off the cobwebs and still vivid images from my head, I reached out to my mobile phone and looked at the display. "Hi, Ethan," I said. "Jesus Christ," he said. "Where the hell are you, Nick?" I wasn't in the mood for all this crap. "I won't be back for a while, Ethan," I said. "You'll have to figure it out on your own. I'll read it when I have time. But we can't do this without you. You know that. Just don't sign anything until I read it, okay?" I continued. He was silent for a minute. "Nick," he said, speaking slowly, "are you saying what I think you're saying?" I said nothing. "Jesus, Nick, please tell me you're not really thinking about, you know, running away from us. Just don't sign anything, Ethan. Got it?" "Come on, Nick. We'll get rid of the bastard before we risk losing you," he said. "Bass players cost 10 per dozen, even good ones like Carl." Damn, I thought. The cat is already out of the bag. No doubt this will hit the news soon, in days rather than weeks. "We'll talk later," I said. "Do your best, but don't sign anything until I agree." I closed the phone before he could say anything else. It was already dark outside, and the clock by the bed showed almost 10. I had gotten enough sleep, so I decided to shower and freshen up, change into clean clothes, and hit the road again. Between the landscape, the nightmares, and the conversation with Ethan, I couldn't get out of Nebraska fast enough. 3.5 hours later, I was in Iowa. "So are you going to give it all up?" said Walter. "Group, women, big money." "I don't know," I said, and I really didn't know. "But you think about it." I nodded. "Ethan was right, you know," he continued, looking straight ahead at the oncoming headlights. "If you're too cowardly to kick his ass, let the group get rid of him. Why should you be the one to run away? Then you'll have your group, your money, your fame, and most importantly, your revenge on Carl. I mean, where will he go without you?" "Maybe I was going to leave anyway," I suggested. He snorted. "Fuck you, Walter," I said. "You remember what it was like? I know you do. You remember being on top of the world after the first few books, and then it all came crashing down as you got caught up in all the glory and glory of being famous and famous." Oh, I thought, good lines for a song. I remembered this phrase as a template for discarded lines. Walter was silent for about an hour, and I was content to leave him alone and just concentrate on driving. Iowa wasn't much better than Nebraska, but the land was at least a little hilly, and this became more noticeable as you approached the Mississippi River. "I returned it, you know," Walter said, interrupting my thoughts. "I remember," I said. "Very good." "That wasn't the reason I left, Nick." I said nothing. It was all over long before I finally left. "I think, what was her name? Trudy." He nodded, and I continued. "Yeah, I guess Trudy just made it a little easier, huh?" "You're right," he said, looking at me. "I was crap. Everyone knew it. I was like that little dude Capote. Wrote some good things, became famous, decided I liked being famous more than writing. But it was fame that ruined everything, not Trudy. I really don't want to relive all of this, if that's okay." "That's not the point," Walter said. "The point is, I brought it back. My last 3 books were some of my best work, if not my best. And all you had to do was leave your family." "Damn it," he thundered. "I didn't abandon my family. Your mother and I were done a long time ago. And I was never a good father to you, even when we were together. I laughed. You can do it again. You do not understand, he said. Fame, all these fancy dinners and Hollywood stars and cameras and interviews, they destroyed me. I lost my purpose and didn't even realize I had lost it until my third book in a row hit the bestseller list. I couldn't stay in Neversville with you and your mom, and she certainly had no intention of leaving. And by that time, I hadn't been a good husband or father, I admit it, for too long to remember. Trudy brought me back down to earth. She took me to the mountains, and I brought everything back. So what are you saying? Leave your wife, move to the mountains, meditate a few hours a day, and everything will come back. He sighed. You should leave your wife because she's a selfish little brat, not just to get your energy back. And I warned you about her before the wedding, remember? This was our last conversation before he died in a climbing accident. And that's exactly what he said about her. I slammed the phone down in indignation and never spoke to him again. He died a year later. Anyway, he continued, giving her up is just getting rid of some extra baggage, so it's more of a bonus that it allows you to get your energy back. Is this what we were to you? Me and Mom. An extra burden? My voice was low, but I'm sure he heard the threat in my whisper. No fool, I was a burden. Just ask her when you see her. Ask Carol. She'll confirm it, and I needed to do it for her and for you, believe it or not. Then, drowning in my grief, I vowed not to let it be in vain. I vowed to become who I was, and I gave up the booze, the cigarettes, and the women. Well, except for Trudy. And then I moved into that cabin on the lake and started writing again, and it all came back. Not right away, of course, but I couldn't believe how quickly everything came back. He spoke the truth. I knew this because I read all his books, even the trashy ones. The first one after my divorce from my mother was about the breakdown of the family. The mother was the heroine of the book, and the little boy, presumably me, was the sympathetic character. The husband was a bastard, and Walter painted himself ruthlessly well. The blame was entirely on him in the book, and he drew just enough flaws in Mom and I to make us believable without any guilt. Okay, I said, so I'm getting rid of the extra baggage. I'm ditching Tara. Do you think that'll help? I mean, the guys in the band aren't helping, are they? So Ethan was right, he remarked. You're thinking about leaving completely, aren't you? I haven't decided yet, I said. It's just not fun anymore, you know. He nodded. Here's some free advice from your old man, he said. You have enough money and God knows you've been busting your ass non-stop for the last 10 years. You're lucky. Most people bust their asses for 40 or 50 years and never achieve what you have. But you're lucky, so enjoy your luck. How to do it? Simple, he said. If you want to leave, then leave. I nodded. Only one thing, however, he continued. Make sure you have something to do with all your free time. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about, okay? If you get bored, you'll end up on the Truman Capote circuit like me. And Nick? I turned and looked at him, waiting. There's nothing more boring than an old ex-great telling everyone how great he was, even if he really was great. I was finally in Illinois, which I agree is no more exciting than Iowa and only slightly more exciting than Nebraska, when my cell phone rang. I looked at the number and hesitated before opening it. Nick, she said, are you there, honey? I sighed. Nick, please talk to me, she said. How long has this been going on, Tara? I asked. It's better to hit right away. Let's not talk about it now, she said. Her voice was capricious. You know that sound, a mixture of a little girl and, how dare you talk about anything other than how wonderful I am? You wanted to talk, Tara, I said, and that's what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about it on the phone, she said. I want to sit down together in the same room. Then we'll talk about it. But I don't want to sit with you now, I said. Where are you, Nick? I can come to you. I'm in Illinois, I replied. At your mom's house? I looked at my GPS. I'll be there in a few hours. Jesus, Nick, it's far away. You've been asleep since then. You left. Still, it was nice to be back home. "Hello," I heard someone call from the top floor. "Hey, Mom," I shouted back. "This is Nick." "Nick?" I heard some noise from above. My eyes widened and a smile spread across my face. Looks like she wasn't alone. "Nick, what are you doing here?" she said, wrapping herself in a robe as she walked down the stairs. "Caught you at the wrong time, Mom?" "Get that smile off your face, young man," she said, tying her belt before running into my arms and squeezing me tightly. I hugged her back. Too much time has passed. It was our first hug since I saw her off at the airport more than 18 months ago. She spent a week with us in Brentwood, and we hugged in the same way the last time we saw each other. She let me go and walked away, assessing me from head to toe. "You look like crap, honey." "Am I bothering you, Mom? If so, I can get a motel room for the night. You know, I'll let you get on with your business." "Bob," she called upstairs, "get dressed and come down. My boy has come to visit his dear old mother." "Bean?" I said, raising my eyebrows. "Like Dr. Bob, chiropractor." She smiled. "But Mom," I said, not knowing whether to be proud of her or embarrassed, "he's 15 years younger than you." She nodded. "Thank God he is," she said. "Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to keep up with me." "Hey, Nick," Dr. Bob called, tucking in his shirt. "This is a pleasant surprise." I looked at him, then at her, then back at him. "Sorry for the intrusion," I said. "Guess I should have called first." He quickly went down the stairs. "Nonsense," he said. "I'm glad to see you." "And then," Mom added, "we're already done." He blushed, but his gaze at her was full of sincere affection, without a doubt. "Let's go," Mom said, turning and walking towards the kitchen. "Let me get you something. You look like you need it, Nick." My growling stomach proved her right. It had been over 40 hours since I left California, and I was content with a few candy bars, bottles of water, and a pre-made sandwich from the store. Bob and I chatted, discussing the latest news in Grant City, while Mom busied herself preparing hot cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. My favorite food since childhood, no one cooked it better than my mother. The key was the homemade tomato soup she always kept in containers in the freezer. "How's Tara?" Bob asked when we were all sitting at the small table in the kitchen. I tried to smile, but to no avail. "Problems?" Mom said. "Her or you?" asked Bob. When my gaze made it clear that I did not understand, he clarified, "Which one of you is cheating? She or you? Or both of you, probably." He laughed. "Still, you're in California now." "She," I said, "with Carl." "Carl Simpson?" Mom asked. I nodded. "He's always been an asshole," she said, taking a bite of her sandwich. Bob coughed at her directness, almost spilling his soup on the table. "Mom has always been like this. If anyone could be more straightforward than Walter, it was Mom. I'm sure that's why he loved her so much. That's why her students adored her. She called a spade, and her literary criticism did not accept time-tested excuses. She thought Moby Dick was crap and told it to anyone who would listen. Thaddeus Thibault, president of Chadwick College, rarely appreciated her outspokenness, but he found it extremely difficult to get rid of a teacher with such popularity among students and alumni, and with such recognition in the national academic community. In general, she was a real find for such a backwater as Chadwick, to Thibault's eternal regret. "Carol," Bob finally managed to say. "Well, that's what he was, Bob," she said. "Little Eddie Haskell, pretending to be a good boy from day one. You look great today, Mrs. Russell Harlan. And did you change anything about your hair, Mrs. Harlan? Pathetic, even when I was little." I smiled. She was right, but most parents were fine with it. Carl was always the most well-mannered, the most polite, and the first to offer help around the house. But when his parents were not around, he was the first to take out a cigarette, a bottle of vodka, which he stole while no one was looking, and poured water on everyone and everything. Overall, he was fun, wild, and reckless. "So what are you going to do?" asked Bob. I shrugged, chewing the last bite of my sandwich. "I don't know," I said with my mouth full. He swallowed and continued. "If it's okay, I'd like to stay here for a while, Mom. Just rest and think. It's hard to think in Los Angeles, you know." She looked at me, pursing her lips and thinking for a minute before nodding. "Well," she said, "I guess it's okay for me if it's okay for Bob." My eyes opened wide. Bean. "We live together now," she said, reaching across the table and taking his hand. "You're kidding, right?" I looked at Bob, and he looked a little uncomfortable. "What about Elaine, Bob?" "She left me," he said, "a couple of years ago. Your mom and I have been living together for 8 months." "And you didn't think to tell me about this?" I told my mother. "No," she said. "It's none of your damn business. And if you cared, you would have called me Nick. But you haven't. Not once in the 8 months we've been living together." "Yes, I did," I objected. "I called on Christmas Day." "It was New Year's," Bob said. "That's when we woke up together, and your mom asked if I was staying a while. I thought she meant a few hours, but she meant a little longer." I laughed. Suddenly, everything became clear. Bob and Mom went to a party on New Year's Day, got drunk, and ended up in bed together. Honestly, it was a good move for Bob. Although he was 15 years younger than his mother, she still looked his age. Don't get me wrong, I'm no Oedipus, but I freely admit that Mom is a beauty and God knows, she's the life of any party she's at. So yeah, it wasn't as weird as it seemed. "What's so funny?" she said, becoming angry. I ignored her. "So, Bob, what do you say? Can I stay here? I'll try not to disturb you." He saw my smile and smiled back, then his face became serious, and he put his hand on my shoulder. "Well, son," he said. I couldn't help it and started laughing. The milk I had just drunk splashed out of my nose as I laughed convulsively at the whole carnival that had suddenly become my life. I went to bed immediately after lunch and slept for 7 hours. When I woke up, I took a shower, brushed my teeth, got dressed, and went downstairs. The note on the refrigerator said it all. "I'm teaching class tonight and Bob is in the office. You're on your own for dinner. Love, Kay." I didn't want to spend the evening alone in front of the TV. On the contrary, the last 2 days with Walter and the flat plains of the American outback have left me wanting in the crowd. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot at the hitching rail. I worked there, first as a dishwasher and then as a cook, when I was in school, and the food was the best in town. Think Chili's or TGI Fridays, but with homemade food instead of pre-packaged, tasteless, expensive crap. Judging by the full parking lot at 8:30 on a Thursday evening, they were still doing just fine. Seeing a full dining room, I headed to the bar and ordered a beer. "Nikki," someone called behind me, and I turned around. Victoria walked towards me, spreading her arms for a hug. "Hey, Vic," I gasped as she hugged me tightly. "They said it was you, Nikki," she said, now holding my shoulders and looking me over. I didn't believe them, but, well, damn it. Then she hugged me again. Victoria Wentworth and her husband Ron have owned the hitching rail for over 30 years. Ron ran the kitchen, Victoria ran the dining room. They were both strict bosses. I quickly learned that perfectionism in everything was the only way to succeed in the restaurant business, but the high school kids they hired became part of the family, and they treated us like their children. Gifts for birthdays, cards with cash for graduation, and severe reprimands for the slightest mistake at work. And they were the only ones who ever called me Nikki. "It's been too long, Nick," she said. 4 years, I think. You're right, too. It's too long. I looked around the place, recognizing most of the visitors. Some of them nodded at me, and I nodded back and smiled. "It looks like nothing much has changed, Vic," I said. She lit up. "No, still the best damn burgers in town." She grabbed my hand and dragged me. "Come on, you should come and say hi to Ron. He's a little busy right now, but I know he'll be glad to see you." Sure enough, Ron was in the kitchen, his white shirt and faded jeans somehow immaculate amid the grease and smoke and sauces being cooked, served and passed to the counter in a smooth routine. He shouted orders like a sergeant, and it took him a minute to notice us. He started shouting something to Victoria, then froze, his mouth falling open. "Nikki?" I nodded. A big smile spread across his face, showing 2 teeth he had lost in a bar brawl in Singapore, and he quickly walked over to us. Pushing aside 2 cooks on the line, he hugged me so tightly that even a boa constrictor would have been jealous. "Damn it, son," he whispered. "It's so good to see you again." Then he, like Victoria, let me go and looked me up and down. "You look like crap," he said. "Too thin. And when was the last time you slept?" I tried to laugh it off. "California way of life, Dad," I said. "Too many salads, not enough steaks." He laughed, a loud laugh from the depths of his stomach. "Damn weaklings, eating crap that's not fit for human consumption. Well, we'll fix you in no time," he said. "Isn't that right, dear?" Victoria nodded, patting me on the forearm and leading me to a small table at the very end. "What's your surprise?" I asked. She nodded towards the waitresses, and I turned around. Some leggy redhead with a great ass was filling a tray with soda. My eyes widened when I realized who it was. "That's right, Nikki," she said. "She came back a few months ago." I said nothing more than gratitude when Victoria left me at the table and went on to look after other tables. As at the bar, I recognized most of the people in the dining room. It was nice to see some of the people I went to school with trying to feed their kids between bites of their food, and the whole place looked like any other thriving coffee shop in Middle America, meaning everyone looked happy at the end of a long day and pleased that they were eating good food with friends and family. Someone cleared their throat next to me, and I turned and looked into the most beautiful blue eyes God had ever created. Amy Standish herself, and she has changed very little in the last 10 years. The same long, thick red hair, high cheekbones, and a tiny dimple in the chin. "Hey, Amy," I muttered. "Hi," she said, looking around the room at the other tables before turning back to me. "Victoria said you already have a burger, so I just need to know what you'll be drinking." No smile, no recognition, nothing. Just impatient to take my order, come back with it, and continue serving other tables. "Please," I said, holding up the nearly empty bottle of Miller Lite. She nodded, wrote it down in her notebook, and left. I watched her leave, then watched her return to my table, set down a fresh beer and take away an empty one, then set down the bottles of ketchup and mustard. "The burger will be ready in a minute," she said, and left again. Amy Standish, my unrequited high school crush. She was in my class, and I tried for a long time to attract her attention. She never noticed me, to the point that when I finally decided to ask her to the homecoming dance, she looked at me like I was crazy. Don't get me wrong, it's not like she was a snob or anything. God, we had enough of those in school, the ones who were content with just the quarterback and the track champions and the wrestling champions and the baseball stars. An ordinary person like me had no chance of being noticed, despite my background and my father's appearance on The Tonight Show. No, Amy was not one of them. She was the brains of the class, a valedictorian who kept herself aloof from almost everyone. Sometimes you would see her chatting with a group of other husks, probably discussing some geometry problem or chemical reaction, but more often than not she would just strut to and from class with occasional stops at her locker, rarely acknowledging anyone around her. We were in our senior year, and I was working as a cook at the hitching rail when she got a job as a waitress. I stood in the kitchen during breaks, watching her run between the tables, the kitchen, and the waitress stand. She rarely said anything to anyone unless it was absolutely necessary to clarify an order or answer a direct question. She often had a faint smile on her face, nodded a lot, then hurried away. Noticing my interest one evening, Ron told me, "Nothing you try, nothing you gain." This, of course, resulted in a no-no for the homecoming dance, and I went back to Ron to tell him about it. He simply nodded and left without saying a word. Thinking that he found me as pathetic as Amy made me feel, I put it out of my mind. But a week later, Ron came up to me as I stood at the kitchen door again, looking at Amy. "Victoria says she's shy," he said. That's why you hardly ever hear her speak. Her parents forced her to get this job to get over her shyness. That is, and Vic thinks she's starting to open up. I nodded. At this rate, I can't avoid retirement before I can have a full conversation with her. But the conversation never took place. 10 months later, on the weekend before we both left for our first semester of college, I finally heard from her. "Hi, Nick." It was the first and last time she said my name, and I still remember my boundless joy at the thought that she knew my name. And to be honest, years later, I sometimes remember her smile when she spoke to me, and only to me that one time. My heart still skips a beat at the memory. "So what about Amy?" I asked Jimmy Schultz. We sat at a table in the bar, drank beer, and reminisced about school. Jimmy had been a star runner in high school and now sold insurance in Grand City, working out of his father's office on Main Street. "Still have a crush on her, huh?" he said. Without waiting for an answer, he turned and looked at her. Yes, who wouldn't? We both stared at her for a minute before Jimmy spoke again. She was tall, about 5'8", with long, slender legs, slightly flared hips, a flat stomach, and small breasts. Overall, a very attractive package. "Met someone in college," he said. "An engineer, I think. I only met him once, to be honest. They had lunch here about 3 years ago. In general, he was as quiet as her, only even more so. He was silent all the time, didn't talk to anyone." He took a long sip of his beer. "I think they got married right out of college," Jimmy continued. "They had a little boy. They lived somewhere in New York or something. She taught, I think, and he did engineering. Then, about a year ago, she moved back to town with a little boy in tow. I don't remember his name, but he's a cute little guy. The wedding ring disappeared, and apparently so did Albert. There were rumors that he left with a male colleague, if you know what I mean." He looked at me when he said the last part, but I'm sure my face gave nothing away. "I guess it doesn't surprise you so much, since you live in California now and all," Jimmy said mockingly. "So what does she do now?" I asked, trying to get back on topic. Jimmy laughed at this. "Well," he said, drawing out, "she's an English teacher at the school. And then she works here on Thursdays and Fridays. I think her parents will watch the baby." "Is she dating anyone?" I asked. "Whoa, man," Jimmy said, turning to look at me. "You're married to one of the sweetest girls in the world. Save some for the rest of us, okay?" I smiled, which obviously reassured him. He turned again and looked at Amy, speaking as his eyes followed her. "So the answer is no, she's not dating anyone. God knows, we've all tried. Hell, she's turned me down more times than I can count." "Then why do you keep trying?" I said. "Just trying to wear her out," he sighed. We both finished our beers, and I went to the bar for more. There have never been, nor will there be, waitresses in Grand City, Illinois. "Have you seen Teddy?" I asked, placing a new bottle in front of Jimmy. "Of course," he said, downing the rest of his last bottle before grabbing another. "Constantly." "Where does he live now?" "On Foster Road," said Jimmy, "a nice spot just north of the Jenkins farm." "What is he doing now?" Jimmy looked at me with disbelief on his face. "Jesus, Nick, when was the last time you spoke to him?" I avoided his gaze as I answered. 6 years ago, at the Grammys. We had a couple of beers after we won Song of the Year." Jimmy put his bottle down firmly and stared at me, his mouth open. "What the hell? You two were inseparable all through school. Are you telling me you haven't seen him in 6 years?" I nodded. "It's just, I don't know. He didn't have much to say last time," I explained. "Then we were so busy, you know, life and all that." He nodded, but his eyes said he couldn't believe it. "Well," said Jimmy, "these royalties he got and continue to get him covered. Nothing fancy, of course, but he's got a really nice house now. He's married." My raised eyebrows indicated that it was a surprise. Jimmy grinned. "Jenny Layden," he said. "They have 2 little girls, both spitting images of Jenny. He teaches English at school. I think he and Amy are good friends. You always see them chatting when he's here." "So he comes here sometimes?" I asked, looking around to see if Teddy was here now. He was absent. Jimmy's head jerked towards the poster on the wall. I read it. Mustang Ranch Friday, July 17th live performance from 9:00 p.m. to 1 a.m. Teddy's face was in the center of the band photo on the poster. I laughed. "That damn bastard," I said. "He left Leadfoot because he didn't want to do it, and now he plays in some bar band in his spare time." Jimmy simply shrugged. "Maybe he's just happier this way." It took me a minute to realize that Jimmy had hit the nail on the head. Teddy never wanted fame and all the problems that come with fame. No, Teddy just wanted to teach somewhere and maybe, if he had free time, play music for fun. Then I remembered our last time together, drinking beer at Spago, shouting over the noisy crowd, trying to hear each other, Teddy nervous all the time in the crowd of people trying to see and be seen. He was like a fish thrown ashore, in a situation to which I had long been accustomed. So that's it. Teddy just wanted a normal life like his parents before him, with a wife, children, and a satisfying job with a little music on the side for fun. He knew what fame would bring. He knew it before all of us, and he didn't want it. Then the first and long overdue realization came to me. Teddy had everything better than me. Much better. "You look like you've been hit in the face with a shovel," Walter said as we walked home in the silence and darkness. "I just suddenly have a lot on my mind," I replied. "Don't tell me Jimmy Schultz finally said something smart," he said. "No," I replied. "That's not the point. Not that it was particularly smart, to be honest. Just common sense that I seem to have lost lately." I turned halfway down the street and looked at Walter. "Mom was from here," I said. "Of course," Walter agreed. "Tyler, 15 miles from here." "And you were from Chicago." "Oak Brook," he corrected. "Almost the same," I said. "Chicago, a rich suburb. No difference. But she was also. That is, her parents, they were ordinary people from a small town, pharmacist and housewife." He nodded. "And what? But your father was an editor at the Tribune, and your mother was a society lady. Came from old meat processing money, if your stories are to be believed." "It's true," he defended himself. "But what are you leading to?" I walked again before answering. "My point," I said, "is that you two were doomed from the start. She is a small-town girl from a typical small family. You are a big city guy from a rich, influential family. You've spent your whole life among famous and glamorous people. Mom hung out in soda bars and kissed guys in the movie theater." He nodded, understanding. "So we were doomed from the start." "Well," I said, "your behavior didn't help much. I think it's bad to have so little in common. You seem to have made things worse by sleeping with every actress you set your eyes on." "Did Jimmy come up with all this?" said Walter. "No, I did it. It's just something Jimmy said that made me think." "So what did he say?" I shook my head. "It's not what he said. The point is that I myself didn't think of it first." "And this?" "He said Teddy had what he wanted. He had a small-town dream, and I almost choked on my beer from such a stupid thought, from such small dreams, until I realized that I was looking at it from the point of view of Hollywood, from a superstar's point of view." I stopped again and looked at Walter. "Walter," I said, "I had completely forgotten about those dreams. Teddy has the royalty money, but he's happier with his family, his career, and his little bar band than I am with my superstar wife, my mansion, 10 times the money he has, and no family." I snorted. "Damn, my best friend is a fucking ghost that I didn't even like when he was alive." Walter watched me closely until the last moment. Then an offended smile appeared on his face, and before I could apologize, he was gone. He did this sometimes, disappearing in an instant when I said something that made him angry. But he always came back, his feathers ruffled and looking for an apology, which I usually gave early. Walter first appeared to me after the Dallas show about a year after his death. I thought someone had put something in my water bottle when I turned around and saw him sitting there looking at me with that same spark of humor in his eyes. During the band's early years of fame, I took illegal substances, and it was like no journey I'd ever taken. First, it was too realistic, and the conversation that followed was too rational. So I spent the next 3 months talking to Walter when no one else was around. By the way, this is the only time he appears, when I'm alone. Then it all became too creepy for me. Despite Walter's repeated protests that I was not going crazy, I decided to see a doctor. The first few doctors, assuming that all this tabloid nonsense was true, told me to stop using illegal substances and alcohol. When I told them it was in the past, they said it was probably residual effects. Still unhappy and still seeing Walter protesting a couple times a week, I finally found someone to run a full battery of tests. Thank God I wasn't schizophrenic, but Dr. Solomon still couldn't find anything wrong with me. 4 months of therapy followed, all explained to Tara as simply needing someone to help me cope with stress. Little did I know that for her, therapy was a completely common thing among the entire acting crowd, and, if anything, a sign of true sensitivity and self-realization. At the end of the therapy, Dr. Solomon closed his notebook, left the table, and sat down in the chair next to me. "I'll tell you what I think," he said, with a satisfied smile on his face. "And what is this, doctor?" "Nick," he said, "I think you're being visited by a ghost." Seeing the expression of surprise on my face, he hastened to continue. "It may not be a real ghost, but a ghost from your past. You need to talk to someone who understands you. It helps you deal with pressure. This is how your mind deals with everything. Your best friends, the ones who know you best, are also your bandmates, and they are part of those who put extra pressure on you. So they are not part of the solution to help you cope. Instead, they are part of the problem that you need to deal with. No, Nick, do you know who knows you best and can best help you get through all of this?" "Walter," I suggested. He smiled and shook his head. "No, Nick, it is you. You are the one who can best help you deal with your problems." "So Walter I just see things?" He shrugged. "I admit, this is a rather rare case, and images rarely last that long. However, I think you have a lot of unresolved issues with your father, and I think you always wanted him to help you when you were growing up. But now, when you really need help, he's gone. So yes, I think your subconscious creates an image with which you can work through your problems. And since your father was the one you always wanted to see in this role, I think the image that your subconscious created was Walter." I nodded. It made sense. So should I be worried about anything? Dr. Solomon smiled. "No, Nick. Honestly, although it's unusual, I think it's a very healthy way to deal with the pressure that's put on you. And I think that when this all blows over, you'll start to see Walter less and less, and you'll just have these little conversations in your head without images." I felt better until Walter showed up the next day while I was struggling with some lyrics. "Have you ever heard such nonsense in your life?" he said. "I'm not listening to myself right now," I said, not taking my eyes off the lyrics. "I'm not you, idiot," he said. "I am your father, and I will prove it to you." I looked up, skepticism written all over my face. "I'll tell you something you don't know," he said. "Something you never knew and no one else ever knew either. Will this work?" I laughed in his face, and he made Dr. Solomon look like a fool. Walter's last, long-lost manuscript, the one hidden in a fake log in a cabin I'd never been to, was published 8 months later to great fanfare. A few beers, good conversation, and a late-night walk-o, and a bacon cheeseburger the size of a black bear's ass that I barely ate half of provided me with a great night's sleep. When I woke up on Friday morning, the sun had long been in the sky, and there was silence in the house. The clock next to my bed showed almost 9, and I lazily stretched, a smile appearing on my face. "Damn it," I thought, looking at my joyful face in the mirror while shaving. "Where have you been? Where has the usually joyful Nick been hiding lately? If that's all it takes, I should have come home to recharge a long time ago." Even 23 voicemails on my cell phone, all of which I deleted at once, could not wipe the smile off my face. Walking down the steps, I took the yogurt from the refrigerator and began to eat it. Then I brewed some fresh coffee, the only bad thing about Grand City so far being the lack of Starbucks, and while it brewed, I went out to the driveway and fetched my guitars and rocking chair from the Escalade. For the first time in a year, I was actually in the mood to write music, and I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass me by. And I wrote for almost 11 hours. Bob came over for lunch, but I refused to eat and continued working. I was in a zone I hadn't been in years, a zone where fresh ideas come hot and frequent, and I filled half my notebook with interesting chord progressions and notes on tempo, melodic line, and other basic ideas. I read somewhere about how Lennon and McCartney wrote Hard Day's Night. It is said that Ringo, on set during the filming of the film, suggested the film's title based on one of his witty lines. The director liked the title, but he noticed that there was no song with that name. No problem. Lennon and McCartney got to work that night, and by the next morning had the entire song, written chords, melody, lyrics, and tempo. This is the zone, and it comes and goes. Unless, of course, you're Lennon and McCartney, these bastards remained in the zone for decades. When Mom and Bob went fishing, I gave up and finished the main melodic line of the second song. She wasn't quite ready yet, but I knew she was close. I also knew that my energy was running low and further efforts would only lead to change the next day. Therefore, it was time to stop, eat, and see if Teddy's group was worth anything. It took me longer to get ready than I thought, and the walk from my mom's house to the bar took another 20 minutes. By the time I got to the hitching rail, the music had already started. When I walked in, the bar was full of people and the dining room was packed. The band, unseen somewhere in the back corner, was performing the old Ernest Tubb number, Walking the Floor Over You, and they were doing a pretty good job of it. They gave the old classic number a nice, upbeat vibe, and the song was driven by a really catchy piano line. "You're back," Victoria whispered in my ear from behind. I turned around, smiled at her, and looked over her shoulder into the dining room. "How long do you think the wait for a table is, honey?" She just laughed, took my hand, and led me to the kitchen. "Guess who's back?" Victoria shouted, pushing the door and entering the kitchen. I saw Ron and Amy talking, but their conversation was interrupted and Amy turned away as I peeked out from behind Victoria. "Ron," she ordered, "make Nikki something to eat, okay?" He smiled. "Too many people?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before asking me what I wanted. I ordered a grilled chicken breast sandwich and some fruit. "California wimps," he muttered. "They ruined a normal guy." I chuckled, then turned to Amy. When our eyes met, she blushed and turned away again. "Amy, honey," Victoria said, "could you get Nick a beer from the bar?" Amy nodded and muttered, "Of course." Then she ran out the door past me. Her body left behind the scent of shampoo and citrus perfume, and my eyes followed her as she made her way through the dining room to the bar. "I told you so," Victoria said. I turned around. They both looked at me, and now it was my turn to stutter. Well, she looks pretty good, doesn't she?" Victoria beamed, and Ron raised his eyes to the sky and pleaded, "Please help him have courage." I laughed. I ate my sandwich and fruit and drank my beer in the kitchen, chatting with Ron while he and the boys sent out last-minute orders and snacks and put away all the equipment and dirty dishes. After I finished eating, I left them to finish cleaning up. Returning to the bar, I noticed Jimmy Schultz leaning against the wall talking to Jenny Cooper, née Layden. She hadn't changed much, maybe gained 10 or 15 pounds, and had a few lines on her face. Otherwise, she looked the same as when we went to prom. She swayed to the music, her eyes fixed on the stage, her ear catching what Jimmy was saying. "Shall I buy you a drink?" I said, approaching them when the song ended. "Nick!" Jenny screamed, jumping on me and hugging me. "Jimmy said you're back." I looked at him over her shoulder, and he nodded in greeting. "I'll buy you a drink," he said. "You will be busy." "When did you hear?" I asked when she finally loosened her grip. "While Teddy and the guys were getting set up," she said. Her eyes turned to the stage, and Teddy looked at us with a mocking expression on his face. He then raised his chin in greeting, and I raised my beer in response. Nick, Jenny said, he wants to know if you'll play a song with them. 3 of the guys are in college, and he says it will make their lives complete if they get to play on stage with you. You will do this? For old time's sake? She had those pleading puppy dog eyes. I couldn't refuse. Sure, Jenny, I said, kissing her forehead. You tell him I'll play something with them when they're ready. Before I could react, she twisted away from my embrace. He said he'd do it, Teddy. Suddenly, all eyes in the establishment turned to me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, said Teddy, you're in for a real treat tonight. I looked around and noticed the looks. Those who knew who I was, and these seemed to be the majority, looked at me with surprised expectation. It's true, Teddy continued. The old wind has returned to the city, and it is here tonight. A few people whistled, and a couple of women clapped. I was told that well, this guy controls the guitar adequately, Teddy said, and I could hear the humor in his voice. Hell, some people even think he can sing, although I'm not one of them. The crowd was laughing and clapping now. So maybe if we ask him nicely, we can convince him to come up here and do a couple of songs. Teddy waved his hand over his guitar and towards me. What do you think, people? Anyone want to see if Nick Harlan can still play the old songs? The crowd erupted, and I almost burst into tears. It's been 10 years since I've played for all these people, and, TV appearances aside, 9 years since I've played in front of less than 15,000 screaming fans. At that moment, I would have given every damn arena in the country one more standing ovation from these people I had known my entire life. Now look at this, Teddy joked as I made my way to the stage, wiping a tear from my eye. He is nervous. I jumped onto the small, crowded stage and leaned toward Teddy. You bastard, I said. Then I hugged him through the guitar, and he hugged me back with such energy that my heart almost burst with shame. Why haven't we talked for so long? The crowd started chanting for us to play something, and Teddy whispered, maybe we should stop this little love festival for a while before we get tarred and feathered. I laughed, stopped hugging, and picked up the acoustic guitar. Looking for a patch cord, the bassist rushed to my aid. Here he is, Mr. Tazarn Harlan, he said, looking nervous and excited at the same time. I smiled. Call me Nick, I said, connecting the cable to the guitar. Is the mixing console set up for this? I asked Teddy. He nodded. Felt when I heard you were back that we better be ready for another instrument. So what do you want to play? I smiled. 2 angels. Teddy's smile stretched from ear to ear, and I wonder if he had the same memory of it as I do. You heard it, boys, he shouted, then turned to me and said, the piano is leading us to this. And so it began, soon joining my rhythm with drums, bass, and Teddy's sad slide guitar line all at once. Once the vocals started, Teddy and I shared the mic the entire time, keeping our guitars away from each other. We then continued with an extended instrumental performance which, with a new twist on the arrangement, superbly showcased the guy's talent on the piano. By the end of the song, listening to the crowd screaming and yelling more, it felt like we were never apart. Teddy was, if not better, then even better on lead guitar, and his voice had much more range than I remembered. Suddenly, I wanted to see how good these guys were, to see if this was really Teddy's hobby or still his passion. When the applause died down, Teddy waved his hand at me. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank Nick Harlan for coming up here. I bowed in response to the applause, then turned to Teddy. I'd like to stay here for a while, if you don't mind, I whispered. Teddy gave me a lazy smile. I think I'd like it. He turned to the rest of the group. Think you can keep up with us? They all nodded, and Teddy turned to me. So what's next? We performed a not very popular Bob Dylan song, Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. It was a 9-minute number, and they really improvised the accompaniment. The drummer, bassist, and I all kept the basic rhythm going, but Teddy improvised some neat melodies throughout the song, and that guy on the piano was outstanding. By the time we finished, people were streaming in the door, and there was no room in the dance area. I stayed on stage until the end of the show, sat with the band during breaks, and signed autographs for everyone. We played mostly country rock covers like Graham Parsons' Return of the Grievous Angel, Steve Earle's Angel is the Devil, a lot of John Hyatt and the Jayhawks songs, and the Rolling Stones' Dead Flowers. We only played 2 Leadfoot songs, both of which Teddy and I wrote together. By the last hour of the show, word had spread and cars were parked along the street for blocks, and no one could move in the building. At 1:20, we finished with the tight, sweet 4-part harmonies of the Poco classic, Keep On Tryin'. The crowd went crazy, and we would have played longer, but that song pretty much killed our voices for the night. I helped the group dismantle the equipment and move it into their cars and vans, accepting free beer from the crowd and lots of pats on the back. By the time we finished, the bar was closed and the bartenders were sweeping up and wiping up spilled beer from the floor and tables. A few of us sat around the bar, drinking the last of the beers in the dim bar. There was Ron, Victoria, Jenny, Teddy, the rest of the band, and myself, and Ron was telling us that we needed to do this a little more often so he could retire one day. Then I heard a quiet but clear voice behind me. Now I think I understand what all the fuss is about. I turned around. It was Amy, and her eyes met mine and held them. I was speechless. "The cat ate your tongue, Nick," Jenny teased. I heard a few chuckles too, but I was speechless. My eyes were glued to hers, and she didn't look away, lost in those deep blue seas. Her face showed no emotion, but she didn't break eye contact. We just stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only 30 seconds or so. "California imbecile," Ron muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. This broke the moment, and Amy smiled briefly before saying, "Anyway, you were really good up there." Looking at Teddy, she added, "Both were good." She was out the door before I could answer. "Still have feelings for her, don't you?" said Teddy. "Of course," Victoria replied. "Just too afraid to do anything," Ron said. "California ruined it." I just smiled. "You know," I said, "that's the longest thing she's ever said to me. At all." "Yes," said Teddy, "but let me tell you, when you get to know her, she's one hell of a talker. It just takes time to get to know her." "But you shouldn't," she said. "Jenny, you're married, and we don't want to see her too close to." Teddy finished the thought. "We don't want her to get hurt. She's been through a lot." Victoria looked at me. I tried to hide it, but I know I flinched at least a little at the mention of my marriage, and Victoria noticed it. She whispered something to her husband, and Ron simply nodded. He must have already guessed that I was in trouble, so the wince probably only confirmed his suspicions. "What are you doing tomorrow?" Teddy asked. I shrugged. "I'll probably just write," I said. "I'm in the zone, and I don't want to lose it." He nodded, understanding what I was talking about. He then turned to Jenny and raised his eyebrows. She saw the look and turned to me. "We want you to come to our barbecue," she said. "About an hour. We have invited about 30 people, and the band will rehearse for their entertainment. Why don't you grab your guitar and join in?" When I didn't answer right away, Jenny leaned over and put her hand on mine. "We really want you to meet our girls," she said, "and Amy will be there too with her little boy." That sold me, and the smile I tried to hide told them all I was coming. As Teddy stood up to leave, he said, "You'll benefit from spending time with normal people for a change. Enjoy a casual meeting in a small town." If only we all knew then how wrong Teddy was. The next day would be far from typical in Grand City, Illinois. I slept until almost 11 on Saturday. I would have slept even longer and probably would have been late for the barbecue if not for my mother's voice, which sounded loud and clear above the noise of the crowd outside. "Get off my lawn," she screamed. "If you damage these roses, I will skin you." I lay there frozen. I've been in this situation a million times, and I knew what that noise was that she was screaming over. A quick glance out the window confirmed my suspicions. "There he is," the lookout operator shouted, and I dove back again. Now my body acted completely automatically. I quickly shaved, showered, brushed my teeth, and dressed in something casual but stylish. Appear before the press looking like anyone else, and they will crucify you. Your fans have never imagined you with tousled hair. If they and the press really see you as a normal guy, then oh my God. 15 minutes later, I walked down the stairs, out the door, and stood next to my mother on the porch. I can handle this, I said, smiling at her before turning to face the 12 or so reporters and cameramen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I said, get off the lawn and onto the sidewalk. Then come over here and we'll do this little interview, okay? They obeyed, just as I knew they would. If they want an interview, they'll have to play by the rules. Once they were all gathered on the porch, I laid down the rules. Okay, let's start with the ladies, then we'll go from left to right. Does that sound fair? They agreed, and some young beauty from Entertainment Tonight began. Nick, the videos of you and Teddy Cooper on YouTube currently have over 10 million views, and they were posted less than 8 hours ago. Are you going to leave Leadfoot and start a new band? Damn it, I thought. Damn internet age. However, I kept a smile on my face and answered. I have no plans to leave Leadfoot, I said. I came home to visit family and friends, and Teddy asked me to join them on stage last night. As you know, we are old friends, and he was one of the founders of Leadfoot. I couldn't refuse, and we had a lot of fun together. But you left in the middle of the recording negotiations, said another lady, this time in her 30s, with her hair held in place by a bottle of hairspray and wearing an immaculate dark blue suit on this hot Saturday morning. There are rumors in Los Angeles that you are tired and are going to leave, that you do not want to sign a new contract for Leadfoot. Is there any truth to this? I shook my head. No. We have a very capable manager, Ethan Rose, who is in charge of negotiations. I just needed a break, and here I am. What about the rumors that you and Tara Boyd are having problems? Said one of the men. And that she's now dating your bandmate Carl Simpson, said another immediately after him. I smiled and tried to avoid the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Tara and I love each other very much, I said. She's busy preparing for the new season, and I just decided it was the right time for a break. That's all. They spent another half hour trying to get me to clarify my answers, but I managed to dodge everyone and stick to the main story. Seeing that it wouldn't get me anywhere, they all thanked me for my time, apologized to Mom for the damage done, and headed back to their vans to edit the interviews for the evening news. I apologized to my mom, then told her I was going to Teddy's for a barbecue. She said she was invited a few weeks ago, and she and Bob would probably stop by when he got home from work. I then packed my 2 guitars back into the Escalade and headed out early. I took the long way down the back roads to make sure none of the journalists were following me and parked in Teddy's driveway at 11:30. This way, I heard Teddy say as I got out of the car. I followed the sound of his voice and the smell of barbecued pork around the house. He stood on the terrace and smoked a lot of pork shoulders in a huge smoking apparatus. Right next to the terrace, 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy, were splashing in the shallow end of the pool. Quite an exciting morning, huh? He said, looking at me as he drank his iced tea. Were they here too? I said. He nodded, seemingly dissatisfied with the development of events. What did you do? He smiled. Told them to get off my property or I'll call the police and have them arrested for trespassing. I laughed. I wish I could do that. I grabbed a can of Diet Pepsi from a nearby cooler and sat down on one of the lounge chairs, watching as he topped the pork with something before closing the lid and sitting down next to me. We spent the next 20 minutes chatting about all sorts of things and watching the kids in the pool. Things started out pretty serious, with me apologizing for having had so little contact over the last 6 years. He shrugged it off, genuinely understanding. That's why I never wanted this life, he said. But you wanted to, and I know how much it took you. This was his last word on the matter. The apology appears to have been accepted. He then told me who else was married, who had children, who worked where, before getting serious. Why did you come back? He said. I didn't answer, preferring to look at the grove of oak trees in the distance. You can talk to me, he said, his voice lowering. I didn't say anything for a minute, but then I turned and looked at him. Teddy, are you happy? He received a questioning look. Of course I'm happy. And you? I sighed. Don't think. Teddy didn't say anything. This is not what I expected, I continued. Oh, I guess that's true, but I'm starting to realize that it's not what I want anymore. It is too. Then come out, he said. Just take it and go out. Walter said the same thing, but it had much more impact coming from Teddy. It's not that simple, I objected. I have obligations. Everyone in the group is counting on me. And I have a wife. Damn it, she'll never move here. He nodded. Is the rumor true? My eyes narrowed as I looked at him. The reporters were shouting questions before they finally left, he explained. One of them said that Carl was sleeping with Tara. He saw the expression on my face and nodded. He tried it with Jenny once, Teddy said. A few years ago, when his parents had a big anniversary party, he was in town for a few days. He tried to get Jenny to join him in his hotel room. And what? Teddy smiled. She threw a drink in his face, quickly cooled his ardor. I laughed. Well, I said, Tara seems to have lit the fire. So what are you going to do? I shrugged. I don't know, Teddy. Honestly, I love her. I like being around her. She is cheerful and funny, sweet and charming. She's great in bed, I think. I feel comfortable with her, I guess. The thought of change really scares me. Think about it, Teddy said, getting up from his chair and walking into the house. He returned a minute later with 2 bottles of beer and handed me one. Have you talked to her about this yet? He asked. I shook my head. Tried, but she doesn't want to talk about it unless we're face to face. And I'm afraid to do it face to face now. I'm afraid I'll just take her back, and it will happen again. He nodded. Well, friend, let me offer my 2 cents. He took a sip of his beer before continuing. You have to find out why she did it. Don't worry about her doing it, it's in the past. It's important to understand why to know if it will happen again. He smiled widely, then said, unless, of course, California has changed you so much that you don't mind sharing it. I was told that such famous people enjoy it. I laughed. No, I confirmed, it hasn't changed that much. Anyway, some people are just wired that way, guys and girls. They don't see it as a big deal. Either it has to do with how they were raised or the way they are wired, I don't know. But if you figure out why, you'll know whether it was a one-time mistake or the first of many to come. Then you need to ask yourself if you can live with it if it happens again. I know you say it's not your style, but what if it happens in 5 years? Would you then be able to give her another chance, wondering when it will happen again? I nodded, considering his words. Walter didn't express himself so clearly, but on the other hand, he never loved her from the first day. So you could forgive Jenny if you caught her in a situation like this? I'd like to think so, he replied. But again, it all depends on the reason. He leaned forward. Let me tell you something, he said. I won't name any names, but let's just say you know these people. Either way, he caught her in bed with a guy. It was the first time, and he's sure she told the truth about it, but the main reason is why he left her. What is the reason? I nudged him. She didn't love him anymore. He looked me straight in the eyes. Some people can't bear the thought of being alone, so they grab a new horse before releasing the old one from the herd. I'm not saying this is right, but it happens often. That's what she did. She found someone that she thought could move from their house to his, and she was kind of testing him. I thought about it. So if Tara just found herself in a bad situation, maybe didn't fight temptation as hard as she should have for whatever reason. Like if you're going through a rough patch or something, he suggested. Okay, are you saying I should just forget about it? No, I'm not saying you should forget about it. I say you should consider this when making decisions about your marriage. He leaned back. Nick, everyone is different, but if you really and truly love her, and you're sure she really and truly loves you, then maybe you should consider trying to fix the lawnmower before you throw it away and buy a new one. Unless, of course, the evidence indicates that the lawnmower is too broken to be fixed. I spatted out gender beers on gender. Did you just compare me to a lawnmower? Jenny shouted from the kitchen window. No, honey, Teddy shouted back. Then he leaned close to me. Only you can make these decisions, Nick. You know this, don't you? Only you will truly know if you can save a good marriage after this. All I can say is that crap, no matter how wrong it is, and it really is wrong, happens to marriages all the time, and people survive it and stay happily married for 50 years. I nodded, and we moved the conversation to other topics as people began to gather. About 15 minutes into our conversation, it was my turn to go get a beer. I walked into the kitchen and froze when I saw Jenny and Amy whispering at the sink as they stirred large bowls of coleslaw and potato salad. They froze when they noticed me, and Jenny tried to hide it by giving me a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek. Amy couldn't look me in the eyes and could barely mutter a hello in response to my greeting. They were talking about me, and I was afraid that they had heard too much from my conversation with Teddy. Dragging my hand full of beer and soda back out onto the deck, I handed them out to everyone. Is there something wrong? Teddy asked. I shook my head and tried to get back to my conversation with Will, the pianist from last night, about who was better, Warren Zevon or Ray Charles. After much discussion and too much input from the others, we agreed that it was too much like comparing apples to oranges, even though Ray Charles was by far the better jazz player and Warren Zevon the more versatile composer. With about 35 people gathered, we all decided it was a good time to play some music. Better finish the fun before we get too drunk, and let's get dirty. Our tools are lard. Everyone gathered in the hangar, the interior of which was finished enough to allow full sound on a small scale, and I brought my guitars from the car and plugged them into spare amps that were sitting around. About 45 minutes into it, Teddy begged me to perform Time to Start Again, a wildly successful ballad from our first album and one of the first songs Teddy and I ever wrote. It was a song about a painful breakup, and the singer tried to convince a rejected lover that he should give love another chance. The best arrangement consisted of just the lead vocal with minimal harmonies, accompanied by fingerstyle guitar and a soft piano line. I agreed and sat on a stool behind the lead vocal microphone, starting the guitar line and waiting for the piano to come in. As the piano began to play, I looked around the crowd and saw Amy standing behind me, slowly swaying to the music. Her eyes were fixed on me, and mine met hers again, and there they remained throughout the song. For some reason, and damn it, I understand perfectly well why I poured my whole soul into it, turning an already sad song into a real emotional journey. By the end, when the spurned lover replies that he just doesn't know if he's ready and the instruments fall silent, you could have heard a pin drop. Then I felt a punch on my arm and looked away from Amy. Everyone in the room was looking at us, back and forth. Amy noticed it too and blushed, while I tried to focus on something else. I think we should take a little break, don't you guys? Will suggested the piano. Everyone agreed, and everyone began to leave the hangar in search of cold beer and lemonade. A minute later, it was just Amy and I in the barn, me still on the stool and her still standing 30 feet away. I heard the whole conversation before, she said after a minute. You and Teddy on the terrace. I tried to smile, but I couldn't. Yeah. Sorry, she said. I know what it is, and I have an idea of what you're going through. Thank you, I finally managed to say. What was wrong with me? She has spoken to me more in the last 24 hours than in the previous 24 years combined. In response, I was now able to pronounce as many as 3 syllables. Did you like it? I tried. Song? She sobbed several times. It was wonderful, she said. Then she tried to laugh. I swear, Nick, if I leave here now, I'll burst into tears. I smiled. I then moved the capo down the neck of the guitar to the 2nd fret and started playing another tune. Maybe this will cheer you up, I said. I started singing, If I Only Had a Brain from The Wizard of Oz. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she began to wipe them away and laugh. her lips sometimes synchronizing with the text. Towards the end, I heard her faint soprano voice join in the chorus. When I finished, I patted the seat of the stool next to me. "Come on," I urged. "Let's sing one more." She looked over her shoulder, unsure. "Don't make me ask any more," I said, perhaps too seriously. Anyway, soon she was sitting next to me. "So it was your little boy at the pool when I arrived?" I began, fingering the notes as I spoke. Her face lit up. "Brighton," she said. "Lovely," I remarked. "Thank you." I played with the guitar for a few minutes, glancing at it occasionally and smiling when our eyes met. She was less shy, I noticed, and I decided to just say what Ron had been pushing me to say for a decade. I stopped playing and folded my hands over the guitar. "I've wanted to tell you something for a long time," I began. Her face became serious, perhaps fear flashed in her eyes. "I don't want this to sound wrong, and I don't really." "Me too," she chimed in, placing her hand on my forearm and gently stroking it. "Since you invited me to the homecoming party." The look of utter disbelief on my face was hard to hide, and she looked down at her lap as she continued. "I spoiled it all. I wanted you to invite me, but when you did, I was horrified. I wanted you to try again, but I knew you wouldn't." She looked into my eyes again. "I wondered all these years, especially the last 3 years after my divorce, how different things would have been if I had just been able to say yes." I still had that same expression on my face, and it was probably getting more and more incredible. "Say something, Nick." "Well, that's it," I whispered. "I didn't expect this." She giggled, then laughed, and soon we were both laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. Then she looked at me seriously. "But it won't do any of us any good right now," she said. "I'm not going to seduce you, and you damn well better not seduce me. You're married, Nick, and I'm not going to be the other woman in this little drama." I tilted my head and pressed my cheek against her palm, enjoying her smooth, cool skin. "After 10 years, I'm just glad we can both speak in full sentences to each other, Amy. To be honest, I'm not looking to force my problems on anyone right now." I raised my head and looked into her eyes again. "Especially someone I care so much about, okay?" She nodded. "And don't think I'll be there if you decide to leave her," Amy continued. "I want to be clear, Nick Harlan. I like you, but we don't know each other anymore. So you better not think that you can just get a divorce and jump straight into my bed, okay? I'm not part of this equation. This is between you and your wife. Teddy is right. You have to decide what you want. I just want you to know that if you think you want me more than her, don't rely on it, get it?" I nodded, more than a little sad. To be honest, our sudden conversation almost threw dear Tara out of my life until the last part of the conversation was said. Amy was right, of course. There was no point in going from one dream to an old-school dream with someone I barely knew. So it was no surprise that we heard a helicopter land nearby and a new pile of problems fell upon me. Amy and I stood at the hangar door and watched the helicopter's blades stop several hundred feet away. Then the side door opened, and I saw Teddy's little girls running with their arms open, shouting, "Uncle Ethan." I was surprised that they knew Ethan, especially well enough to call him uncle. I was a complete stranger to them, and my guilt for not being close to Teddy returned. Ethan jumped out of the helicopter and turned, holding out his hand to help the older man follow him out. I cursed quietly when I recognized him as Monty Evans, the Columbia executive in charge of negotiating our contract. "Do you know him?" Amy asked. "Yes." I walked towards them and was soon joined by Teddy as we walked across the lawn. Teddy seemed happy to see Ethan and puzzled by the obvious anger on my face. "Hey guys," Ethan said with a big smile. "Do you mind if we join your party?" "Of course not," Teddy replied, shaking Ethan's outstretched hand before introducing himself to Monty. I, on the other hand, ignored both outstretched hands, preferring to glare. "Come on, Nick," Ethan pleaded. "Do not be like that." "What are you doing here?" I told Monty. He hesitated in response. "Well, maybe that's not the most, traditional way of doing things." "I'm on vacation," I replied sharply. Turning to Ethan, I continued. I thought this point was crystal clear. Ethan ignored my anger and continued to smile. It happened that way, he said. He then walked towards the house, saying as he walked, the last thing that happened was a video of you guys last night that went viral all over the internet. Sorry, Nick, Monty said. You too, Mr. Cooper. This is becoming very popular and we can't wait any longer or things will get much worse. Could you please get the rest of the guys from the band that played last night? They're upstairs by the house, Teddy said, his voice growing wary. Could you give us 15 minutes of your time here, said Ethan, with those guys who played last night? No, I said. We organize barbecues. This is not the time or place for. Nick, will you please listen to me this time? Monty begged. You really don't understand. Things looked really bad last night, but everything changed when these videos started appearing online this morning. Teddy smiled. How so? Ethan's smile was mysterious. Let's wait until everyone is here, okay? So we walked the remaining 100 feet in silence. I directed Ethan and Monty to the hangar while Teddy went to gather Will, bassist Rob, and drummer Jimbo. I watched as they entered the huge room. Everyone except Teddy was nervous and excited. Will was tall and thin, with an unkempt mop of brown hair, an intense, sullen personality, and classic pianist hands, meaning his fingers were long. Rob was hidden behind Will, but moved around him to reveal his short blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and a wrestler's figure with muscular arms and broad shoulders that tapered to narrow hips and stocky legs. Jimbo was a simple guy, maybe 5'10", neither thin nor fat like the guys on the farms around Grand City, with short brown hair combed to one side and an open face that couldn't hide his emotions. All three of them were nervous when Teddy introduced them. Surprisingly, Teddy seemed intrigued. I had an idea where this was going, and I'm sure Teddy knew too. I expected him to be impatient or distant, but he had a quiet smile on his face that didn't give anything away. Guys, Monty began, looking at the three college students, I'm sure you're all well aware that your little show last night generated quite a bit of interest. Their smiling glances at each other showed me that they were very aware of their success on YouTube. That was good, Monty continued, but my boss got a call this morning, and now he's interested too. Come on, Ethan urged. Tell them who called. Monty looked at all three of them, then his eyes fell on Teddy. Bob Dylan, if you can believe it. He liked your version of Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. He said he had never heard it performed better. The singing, the arranging, everything. Teddy nodded as if this was a normal thing for him. I, on the other hand, didn't bother hiding my surprise, and I appreciated the high fives between Will and Jimbo, who were obviously delighted. I don't care if you like Dylan's music or not. He is a certified genius in the industry. When Bob Dylan speaks, which is rare, record execs listen, especially after he reinvented himself about a decade ago and again proved his ability to create. Teddy, I'm not saying we liked everything we saw and heard, to be honest, Monty continued. I spent half the morning watching other videos from the show. They weren't of the best quality, I'll tell you honestly. However, we want to see what you can do, if you don't mind. Teddy simply nodded. Now. Monty nodded in response. If you do not mind. Teddy looked at the guys, then at me. All of us. I understood what it meant, and everyone else understood it too. My eyes settled on Ethan and stayed there. After a minute, he nodded. All of you, he said. Teddy looked at me and shrugged, his smile starting to fade. I think I agree, he said. He looked unsure now. Me too, I said. Teddy took a deep breath. Okay, he said. Guys, turn everything on again, and I'll go and gather everyone back here. Wait, Monty said. We would prefer to see you without any interruptions, if you don't mind. Teddy simply ignored him, and Ethan and Monty both turned to me for help. Don't look at me, guys, I said. Maybe it's better to get used to it now, if that's what you really want. So we did it. We played 4 more songs, 2 energetic tunes, 1 ballad and 1 mid-tempo. Monty recorded everything on a portable video camera to later show it to his bosses in Los Angeles. Of course, the sound was still bad, but it was still better than a cell phone video uploaded to YouTube. When we finished, Monty thanked us and declined the invitation to stay for the meal. Instead, he promised to call the next day, got back into the helicopter, and flew away. Ethan, on the other hand, stayed for the celebration. I was amazed, and my guilt for being away so long deepened when I noticed that almost everyone knew Ethan by name. An hour after the show, I helped Teddy remove the pork shoulders from the smoker. "Are you really interested in this?" I asked. He smiled. "Let's talk away from prying eyes." We rested our shoulders under a huge aluminum foil tent. In the meantime, I made my rounds and chatted a bit with Mom, Dr. Bob, and Will, all of whom knew each other. Mom shocked me when she told me that she had helped Teddy recruit Will, Rob, and Jimbo from Chadwick College. "It was easy," she said. "I just asked the music teachers who was capable of what and brought them together with Teddy. He's already sorted everything out himself." Half an hour later, Teddy called me into the kitchen to help him tear the pork shoulders into sandwiches. He gave me 2 plastic things he called bear claws and showed me how to use them. Then we each grabbed a shoulder and started tearing apart 50 pounds of fatty pork for a clean barbecue. Teddy let me get comfortable before speaking. "Okay," he said. "The answer is yes. I am seriously considering it." I didn't say anything, not knowing what to say. After a few minutes, I noticed that Teddy was no longer tearing meat, and I looked up. He looked at me. "Say something." "Okay," I replied. "Do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into? What do you tie your family into?" He smiled his lazy smile. "I know exactly what I'm getting myself into," he said. "This has been planned for a long time, and we carefully prepared for this day." Now it was I who stopped, waiting for clarification. The explanation came with Ethan bursting through the kitchen door. He looked at us and said, "Are you telling him everything now?" "Yes," said Teddy. "It's better to end this now." "What are you talking about?" I said, feeling a surge of fear. Ethan ignored the question and rummaged through the drawer until he found another pair of bear claws. He then joined us and started tearing the pork. Not only did everyone seem to know Ethan, I realized, but Ethan Rose, the Jewish guy from Jersey, knew how to pull pork, not that I ever knew him for keeping kosher, and even knew where the kitchen utensils were kept. It was a conspiracy, I now realized, and went back to work, waiting for the explanation to come out. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Honestly," he said, "Leadfoot really hasn't been at its best since the second album. You're a great composer, but all your best stuff was when you collaborated with Teddy." I nodded. He was right, of course. We've ridden the wave of our initial popularity ever since, although it was still good enough to sell millions of albums and sell out hundreds of arenas. "So 5 years ago," Ethan continued, "maybe 10 months after the Grammys, when you all won everything, I flew to Teddy. I had already noticed a slight decline in my songwriting and wanted to get his opinion. So he showed me all the things he was still writing." I looked up at this. I had no idea Teddy was still writing. "We definitely didn't play any of that last night." "This is bullshit," Teddy said. "Good enough for album filler," Ethan continued, "but it wasn't a hit." "You've always been the best songwriter, Nick," Teddy continued. "Ethan has been trying to get me to team up with you again for the last 5 years." "So why not just call?" I asked. "We could cooperate. You could stay away from the rest." "I was going to," Teddy said. "About a year and a half ago, I contacted Ethan and told him to reach out to you." "But it was in the middle of the studio sessions for Cactus Rose," Ethan said, naming our latest album. "All the songs had already been written, and you were exhausted from the studio sessions. The timing wasn't right, and we were at the end of the recording contract. So why not wait a little and then tell me?" I said. None of them met my eyes on this question, and I waited for an answer. After a minute, I put down my bare claws and placed my hands on the table, leaning towards it. Admit it, guys, I said, more than a little angry. Teddy was the first to look up. About 5 months ago, you gave Ethan the next batch of songs. You've just returned from an American tour and spent most of your time writing. He forwarded them to me for comment, and I reviewed them. Rewrote most of them, actually. It was a pleasant surprise, and I didn't understand what was wrong with it. Okay, then they're better than I thought. My smile soon disappeared, however. Ethan, the songs we're negotiating with are mine. Teddy never touched them. Damn, Ethan said. Nick, I got the songs back about 2 months ago, just before negotiations began. They're better, much better, actually. Not quite ready, but close. So why don't we use them? Because Ethan found out about Carl and Tara about a week before he got my rewrites, Teddy said. I felt my anger rising, my jaw tensed, and my hands clenched into fists, which I struggled to keep on the table in front of me. You knew about this for 2 months and didn't tell me, I said to Ethan. And you, I said to Teddy, did you just a few hours ago tell me to find out why before I make a decision? Did you know too? They looked at each other, then back at me. My advice remains the same, Teddy said. None of us have any idea how long this has been going on, how many times they have met, or, most importantly, why it happened in the first place. But damn it, Teddy, you should have told me. Now he threw down the bare claws. When, Nick, do you want to answer this for me? When the hell should I have told you? You haven't told me anything in 6 years. Think about it. 6 damn years. You didn't even know I was married, did you? My anger at him was now mixed with guilt. He was right, of course. I sent you a wedding invitation, Nick. You ignored him, didn't even send him a card. So you want to tell me when I should have told you, or better yet, why should I even bother? Theodore Cooper, Jenny shouted from behind the door. We all looked at her, and the look on her face was enough to strike fear into the hearts of greater souls than ours. You have guests outside, she hissed. I don't think they need to hear this. This nonsense. Is it true? We all hung our heads, muttered our apologies, and went back to tearing apart the pork. She turned around, slammed the door behind her, and soon we heard her cheerful voice telling everyone that these were just guys being guys. I never saw the invitation, Teddy, I said. I'm really sorry. I'll be honest, I felt like crap since the first time I saw you. You were really good, and I have no right to count on that. And what I said still stands, he said. You still have to find out more. Heck, if they only hooked up a few times, and if you can live with that reason. I'm not saying I would forgive her and try to keep it that way. However, I'm not you, and I think you really need to deal with this. I nodded. Then I looked at Ethan. And you, I said, lowering my voice. Only money, right? You were afraid to tell me because you were afraid it would kill the band and your money cow, right? No, Nick, he said. It's not just about money. You are like a brother to me. You're the only one I've ever gotten along with well, you and Teddy. I just didn't want to see you on the street. You'll quit Leadfoot without a plan and, well, I don't know. I just know I didn't want you to disappear, okay? And he told you everything? Teddy asked. No, I didn't tell you, I answered sharply. I found them myself, Teddy. You caught them because I finished negotiations 3 hours early, Ethan said. Did you know that they would be together? He nodded. I asked someone to keep an eye on Carl. When he pulled up to your house, I received a message just as we started. Do you remember how angry I was at the very beginning and walked out after finishing the meeting? Why didn't you just tell me? Would you believe me? Me, not Tara, or even Carl? I chuckled. Well, I definitely wouldn't believe Carl. He's a womanizer. But he was right, and I knew it. I would be angry at him for even suggesting that Tara was cheating on me. Why then try to bring me back to negotiations? He didn't think you'd run away, Teddy said. He thought that you would go straight to him and demand that Carl be kicked out. Which I immediately suggested, Carl intervened. Or you'll just leave Leadfoot, Teddy finished. At this point, I was going to show you Teddy's reworked songs, get you a record deal, and save your career, Ethan added. Oh, and help you find a new bass player. And you helped him with this? I asked Teddy. His lack of denial told me that was the case. It was difficult to perceive right away. To be honest, I was pretty angry, but why be angry with them? I doubt I would have done anything differently. Sure, Ethan cared about his wallet, but he really cared about me. And about Leadfoot, too, for which we paid him a lot of money. Then it dawned on me. Okay, if this was all to save Leadfoot and get Teddy back into songwriting, then what was this afternoon? Columbia has never seen anything like this, Ethan said. Are these scenes on YouTube? They are amazing. Of course, you are in them, and this guarantees great interest. But there's much more to it than just that. Damn, they're like that British girl on that show. Susan Boyle, I think. In general, it's even more. The rumor spread across the internet like wildfire. Monty checked before we got here, and already there are over 20 million views on 3 of the 7 videos, and the other 4 have over 15 million. And you probably can't ignore Bob Dylan, right? Teddy said, smiling lazily. If you want to keep your job at Columbia, then no, Ethan confirmed. So they wanted to see if there was a way to make money from it. Right after Dylan called, Monty called me and asked if I thought it could work. The two of you are together again. I went straight to his house and showed him the reworked songs. He looked through them and just threw the entire folder of songs on the floor. Ethan smiled. If I had shown him these songs from the very beginning, we would have already signed a contract, and now we would be kicking Carl out of the group right in the middle of it. At this point, my anger disappeared, and it was difficult for me not to smile. So now he's really screwed, huh? It's worse than you think, Ethan said, glad that I wasn't angry anymore. He's almost broke. Is it true? Teddy asked. Ethan nodded. He spends money faster than he earns, and unlike you two, he has no income from song copyrights. He receives some income from album sales, but they cannot finance his luxurious lifestyle. Nick, you and Tara have a really nice house in Brentwood, by the way. But you saw Carl's house, didn't you? His damn ski lodge in Aspen, his apartment in New York, his mansion in Malibu. Damn, I think he just bought a house in London. What the hell is he going to do in London? I asked, laughing. Chasing London girls, Teddy suggested, which caused a knowing laugh from everyone. We finished shredding the pork and placed it in serving trays. I stayed behind as Ethan carried the first tray through the kitchen door. Teddy, I called, and he stopped. I'm really sorry, buddy. He turned around. I may have been more harsh than I meant, he said. I shook my head. No, you were right. I didn't show up. And I can't believe I didn't notice the wedding invitation. He smiled lazily. I may have exaggerated a little, he said. I deliberately sent it to your home address during your world tour, knowing that you would not receive it in time. Sorry, old friend, but I just wanted a normal wedding. With the members of Leadfoot, it would be anything but normal. Moron, I said. Moron, he replied. We took the trays out onto the terrace and placed them next to the buns on the serving tables. As I turned to the crowd, I noticed Amy watching me with a thoughtful expression on her face. Teddy walked up to her, kissed her forehead, and then whispered something. She turned to me and her face relaxed. I smiled, and she smiled back. Then it pricked me because I wanted to be the one who kissed her forehead and whispered soothing explanations into her ear. I took a beer and stood in the corner, alone with my thoughts. I realized that Tara had cheated on me more than once, and it seemed like it had been going on for some time. There was no doubt that I would never be able to forget it, and I was sure that my marriage was officially on the downward slope. However, I decided to take Teddy's advice and at least listen to her. After 5 years together, I really wanted to know the whole truth about what she did, or at least as much as she was willing to tell. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned around. Penny for your thoughts, Amy said softly. I just remember what my father said, I said. Sometimes you are a dove, and sometimes you are a monument. She laughed, and her face lit up with laughter. I had never heard her laugh before, and I had never seen such an expression of pure joy on her face. I suddenly felt joy from giving her this look, this uncontrollable laughter. So who are you? she asked. Dove or monument? I shrugged and smiled widely. I don't know yet, I said, but things are clearly looking up. I had no idea what awaited me tomorrow. You better get up, Walter muttered in my ear. I turned around, surprised to see him so early. The clock on the bedside table showed a little after 9, and I had gotten enough sleep. What is the problem? I asked. He looked out the window and then back at me. The little cheater didn't wait, he said. She was on the morning shows telling everyone she was leaving you because you were a womanizer. I smiled. It was some kind of strange dream, I thought he just said. I said, get out of bed, he thundered. The blankets flew off me as if they had been torn away by an invisible hand. I froze. He had never done anything like this before, and I didn't even know he could move things. Yes, he said, like a real ghost. Now get your ass off and get ready. The press will be here any minute. He was right, and I hastily cleaned myself up. 15 minutes later, I stood in the kitchen, looking at Dr. Bob, who was fidgeting nervously, and Carol, who was angry. Have you already heard? Carol demanded an answer. I nodded, and she didn't ask how I knew. This is true? She barked. I shook my head. Not once, I said. I told you so, Bob said, patting me on the shoulder. The home phone rang. Carol picked up the phone, said hello, and passed it to me. This is Ethan, she said. Good morning, I said into the phone. Not yet, he replied, sounding more cheerful than I expected. But soon the morning will be really good. What's happening? I asked. Looks like they were in a hurry, he said. Tara's agents and PR people decided that you weren't coming back, and it seems they started protecting her image and making her a victim. I nodded. My God, why did she do this without talking to me? I would have remained silent. This kind of crap was the last thing either of us needed. How do you think you can cope with this? I asked. I'll tell you when you arrive, he answered. Where to go? To Teddy's house, he said. Wait until the first media representatives arrive, then get in the car and come here. Why wait? I asked. So that they follow you here. There's no point in putting your mother through this crap on a Sunday morning. What about Teddy's family? There's no. We're okay, Teddy said on the other line. Half an hour later, I pulled into Teddy's driveway, followed by a convoy of news vans. Apparently, they had learned their lesson from yesterday because they all parked on the side of the road and none of them entered Teddy's territory. What's happened? I asked, entering Teddy's living room. This is it, said Teddy. He turned on his TiVo and the talk show began. I watched. Tara, the presenter began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. There are rumors that your marriage is under threat. There is a deal of truth in it. Tara tried to smile, but couldn't. Great game, I admit. I've seen her do it 1,000,000 times. Having received no answer, the presenter felt blood in the water and sharpened her knives. I'm sorry if this is inconvenient for you, but there are rumors in Hollywood that you have started dating Carl Simpson, your husband's colleague in the band Leadfoot. This is true. Tara began to speak softly, and the camera zoomed in on an image of her expressing feigned pain. Carl and I are friends, she said. I admit that we were seen together, but he was there solely as a friend to support me during this extremely painful time in my life. The presenter could hardly contain her joy. And what painful things are happening in your life now? Tara looked straight at the presenter and switched to a look of determination. Nick has had several affairs, she said. Carl was the one who told me about it. I didn't believe him at first, but my agent, who is also one of my oldest and closest friends, insisted that I try to confirm the stories of Nick's infidelity. We confirmed that Carl was telling the truth. How many women does Nick date? Asked the presenter, not believing her happiness. I'd rather not discuss this, Tara said. Suffice it to say that I ran into him with my discoveries last Wednesday, and he left, and I haven't seen him since. Teddy turned off the TV and turned to me. He tried to maintain his lazy smile, but he only managed to look upset about the whole thing. Ethan, on the other hand, was smiling. Well, he said, it looks like events got ahead of us. I nodded. It looked like we wouldn't have that little conversation with Tara. She forced me to act, and now I decided to play the cards she dealt me from under the table and get rid of her from my life. Now the choice is yours, Ethan continued. We can either let her get away with it or bury her. My eyebrows raised, and I looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Documented her little affair from the moment I found out, Ethan said. We have photographs, videos, and testimony. After our little discussion yesterday, I also reached out to Los Angeles and asked some people to dig deeper. I already heard back from them this morning, and we may have even more information soon. My jaw dropped. Is there anything else? I asked. Yes, Ethan answered. Looks like she slept with several of her co-stars. Half the cast and most of the crew know about it, and some are willing to share the dirty details. I was overcome with a cold. It was standard Hollywood crap, but I never suspected that my marriage or my loving wife was up to par. The past few days had shown that I was apparently just part of the ideal facade of American sweetheart. She was bright, funny, charming, and a loving wife. No. So what will it be? Ethan asked. I looked at Teddy. He looked straight at me, his jaw clenching and unclenching nervously. Bury the bitch, Jenny shouted from the kitchen. I giggled. And you? I told Teddy. He nodded. Talking won't change anything, partner. I think you now have all the answers to where your marriage is at. Then let's discuss options, I told Ethan. What if we don't do anything? Doing nothing means your career will suffer. This will make any new recording negotiations for Mustang Ranch difficult. Come on, I said. This kind of shit happens all the time. It didn't hurt Mick Jagger, did it? Ethan laughed. No, he agreed. But then again, Mick Jagger's whole image has always been a bad guy. Yours, on the other hand, has always been a quiet, thoughtful poet. Nice guy, in other words. If you don't challenge this, you risk destroying this image. From Columbia's perspective, they risk losing millions due to the sudden unknown. Remember, Nick, you have a huge following among both country fans and rock audiences. Rock fans don't care, but old Marge in backwoods Mississippi, who goes to church every Sunday and drags her husband along, she's going to have a problem with you. I looked out the window at the lineman standing along the road, then turned back to Ethan. Okay, I said, tell me how to do it. His smile stretched from ear to ear, and he opened his case. 20 minutes later, Teddy held a press conference in the barn. They were ready when I walked in and headed to the front. Nick, they shouted in unison, followed by a stream of questions that drowned out everything around them. When they finally died down, I began. Same rules as yesterday, friends, I said. Let's start with the ladies, then go from left to right with the men. I looked at the young girl who started yesterday. Sorry, but yesterday you already started first, I said, then turned to the elegantly dressed professional who was second yesterday. Mr. Harlan, she began. Her tone was condescending, and her eyes glowed with anger. She was either angry at my evasions since yesterday or furious that I was so blatantly unfaithful to poor Tara Boyd. Ethan suspected that she would be the perfect first choice, and her tone told me that everything was going according to plan. Miss Lockhart, I answered, trying to keep an innocent expression of pain on my face. Mr. Prose Harlan, your wife told Valerie Plymouth this morning that you ruined your marriage with a series of affairs. Is there any truth to her accusations? I took a deep breath, turned to make eye contact with the assembled reporters, then turned back to the bitch who thought she had me in the clear. I'm sorry to say this, but Tara was partly right, I began. At that moment, dozens of flashes illuminated me and temporarily blinded me. This helped me keep a grimace of pain on my face as I continued. Tara was right that our marriage is truly over. However, she was wrong in saying that I had ever cheated on her or our marriage. With that, I took the contents out of the envelope. Then I turned to the young girl from entertainment tonight. Your turn, Miss Miller, I said. So you claim that you have never cheated on your wife? Not once, I said. If she has evidence to the contrary, as she stated this morning, I would very much like to see it. Because I'll tell you all right now, until Wednesday afternoon, When I walked in on my wife and one of my oldest friends in the world having sex in our house, I thought we had the perfect marriage. Now, however, I know that this is not true. Are you saying that she cheated? Asked the first man in line as the flashes illuminated me again and the cameras and microphones moved closer. Unfortunately, I said, that's exactly what I'm saying. Do you have evidence of this? Demanded the original Panther, her disbelief obvious. Your turn, I said to the next man, ignoring her. He looked at the Panther and smiled. Do you have evidence to support your accusations? He asked. This report was prepared by A&R Investigations in Malibu, California, I said, holding the documents in front of everyone. As you will all soon see, my wife was somewhat less than truthful this morning, and this report will prove it. In what aspects was she not truthful? Asked the next reporter. She has had an intense physical relationship with Carl Simpson for at least the last 2 months, I said, my voice shaking at the end. I paused to collect my thoughts, almost urinating from internal delight, playing the role of the deceived husband to the fullest. This report contains dates, times, photographs, and much more, I continued after a minute. And more importantly, I was informed that this was not the first time in our marriage. Do you know the names of others? Someone shouted. I don't really want to get into this, I said, stuffing the report back into the envelope. My manager will provide you with an edited version of this report shortly. For now, I want you all to understand one thing. I loved my wife with all my heart and thought that she loved me back. I have been faithful to our marriage and to Tara from the day we met and would never do anything to jeopardize our marriage. I never cheated on her, and I was going to die without doing it. Unfortunately, it was a terrible shock to learn that Tara did not feel or act the same. Questions began to fly in a wall of sounds again. I ignored them, raising my hands for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I know you all have many more questions to ask. However, I ask that you now respect my desire and need to deal with all of this privately with the few family and friends who have offered me their support since I found out about all of this a few days ago. With that, I turned around and walked out of the barn, leaving Ethan to deal with the rest. How was it? Teddy asked. I was exhausted. It was fun for a while, but now that it's over, it finally dawned on me. My marriage is dead. My wife betrayed me repeatedly, and I never suspected anything. And now the whole damn world will be watching this for a long time. Jenny hugged me, tears streaming down her face. You really deserve better, Nick, she repeated. All I could do was hug her back and try to hold back my tears. I succeeded, but with difficulty. By noon, the press had left, and the guys from the group drove up to the house. Already have news? Jimbo asked for everyone. He'll be here in about an hour, Ethan said. This was the first I heard about it. Seeing my gaze, Teddy spoke. Nothing has been decided yet, he said. Let's see what they say, and then we'll discuss it among ourselves, okay? I shrugged. It couldn't hurt to listen, but I was surprised that Teddy seemed to actually be considering this seriously. 45 minutes later, Monty pulled into the driveway in a Lexus SUV. Once we were all seated in the living room, Monty began. Columbia wants to sign you to a recording contract, he said. Rob and Jimbo exchanged high fives, and Will pumped his fist enthusiastically. Conditions? Teddy asked. Monty laid them out. They weren't particularly good at first, but included bonuses if album sales met or exceeded expectations. Overall, it was almost as good as the terms offered for Leadfoot, which was surprising given Leadfoot's proven longevity and popularity. However, they recognized that my participation was necessary for this deal, and Monty made this very clear from the very beginning. So Leadfoot is dead? I asked. He nodded. Tara's antics this morning guaranteed that, he said. Your answer, although excellent for you, is killing the group. They have no interest in re-signing with Leadfoot while this chaos is starting. What if we get rid of Carl? Ethan suggested. Monty shook his head. It does not matter. Then we'll have to deal with the unknown, the new band member, and how well he fits at the start of a new contract. And of course, there's also the problem of songwriting. Monty turned to Teddy. They don't just want Nick, Monty said. They need songs and you. They think there is great chemistry between you, all of you. He looked around at everyone in the group to make sure they understood. We need all five or nothing. Honestly, the guys think they could only handle Teddy and Nick, but I convinced them otherwise. You give a really different sound, something we don't hear much, and would like to explore a little more. However, it's a risk that record companies don't often take. That's why they have such conditions. They don't think they can lose with Teddy and Nick involved, but I'm sure the benefits will come from what all five do. Monty waited patiently while we all took it all in. I have a condition, Teddy said. Then, looking at the others, he added, as long as you guys want to do it. I watched as Will, Rob, and Jimbo nodded vigorously. Teddy's eyes then locked onto mine, waiting for a reaction. I'm interested, I said. Looks like I won't have anything else to do, right? This was enough for Teddy, and he continued. I have a family, he said. She will always come first. I smiled, feeling that this was going in the right direction. Monty seemed unsure what to do. So I'm giving it 2 years and 2 albums, Teddy continued. I'll take a leave of absence from work. But if in 2 years I'm not happy with it, if it's going to hurt my family, I want to be able to get out of the 3rd album. Does anyone have problems with this? Ethan asked. We all shook our heads except Monty. This may change some conditions, he said. The conditions don't change, Teddy said. All that will change is that we can abandon the 3rd album if I want to leave, and if they or you don't want to continue without me. What do we get in return? Monty asked. Teddy smiled, and I realized that he had already thought about all this in advance. If we stay together, you will receive an automatic option for the 4th album on the same terms as the 3rd, he said, and I will not have the right to go out and not participate in the 4th album. Monty thought about this for a moment, then spoke. I think I can sell this, he said. When do you think you can give me the answer to the rest? Give us a couple of hours, Monty, Ethan said. Go have lunch and be back here by 3. Try to confirm that the conditions suit you, and we will give you an answer in a couple of hours. Jenny entered the room as Monty left. So how is it? She asked. They're offering us a really sweet deal, Teddy told her. She nodded, biting her lip and turning to me. Will you take care of him for me? She asked. I looked from her to Teddy, then to Ethan, Rob, Will, and Jimbo. They held their breath, waiting to find out whether I agreed or not. Then I saw Amy standing in the kitchen doorway, with her son in her arms and an incomprehensible expression on her face. So how is it? Ethan pushed. Here I stand, a few hours after finding out my marriage was over. Then, to top it all off, I find out that the group that has been everything to me for the last 10 years no longer exists. And oh yeah, I have 2 hours to decide whether to start it all over again with an old friend who I hadn't seen in years until recently, and 3 virtual strangers. Without saying a word, I went outside to get some fresh air. 10 minutes later, my thoughts were interrupted by a quiet presence behind me. I think Teddy really wants to try it now, Amy said. He's been talking about this all these last years. He regretted leaving the group. That's why he gave all these songs to Ethan. He wanted to return. I turned to her. This is all too sudden, you know. She nodded, her face full of sympathy. I mean, damn, I just wanted some time to think, to take it all in, I said. Now there is no such time. She put her hand on my shoulder. I don't think so, she said. Teddy and Jenny take care of you. They will be there for you. The band. Well, it'll give you something to do to take your mind off things, right? She was right, of course. In fact, I couldn't imagine better company in this sudden shitstorm that seemed to only be gaining momentum. What about you? I asked. She was surprised by this. What about me? If I do this, return to the road, to the studio, and continue to do this, how will you feel about it? She didn't blink. She saw it coming, even if I just thought about it. How I feel about it doesn't matter. She took my hand and led me across the grass towards the trees in the backyard. Nick, she said, we're not here now. There are you and me, but there are no us, okay? I was silent, and she seemed ready to explain it all in my silence. Yes, I like you, she said. From what I saw. But we are not the same people we once were, and we never knew each other then. I'm just a vision from your past, someone you think you'll be comfortable with after everything that's happened to you. She stopped and turned to me. Everything that's happening to you right now, Nick. Do you understand this? Okay, she was right. My head was in my ass, and I was enjoying visions long forgotten. But maybe I want to get to know you better now, I said. It's normal, she whispered. Then this is what we'll do, okay? We get to know each other. But I'm not going to run into your bed, Nick. Not now. Not after your marriage just ended. I don't need this, and my son certainly doesn't need me to go through something like this again in the near future. I listened, looking into her eyes. Of course I heard her, and deep down I knew she was absolutely right. But still I leaned over and kissed her. Then, as I gently pulled her closer for more, she pulled away. Damn it, Nick, she said, anger and embarrassment coloring her face and making her eyes sparkle. Did you even listen to anything I just said? Thank you, I whispered back. At least you gave me good dreams for a while, and something to look forward to in the future. Her anger dissipated, and she hugged me tightly. I responded, enjoying the feel of her body against mine. Enjoy it, she muttered. That's all you'll get from me for a while. I enjoyed it, and as she said, this was the extent of our contact for a while. Back at the house, everyone gathered in the living room. I heard quiet conversation as Amy and I entered through the kitchen door, but their conversation stopped and all eyes turned to me as we entered the front room. Amy sat down on the couch, leaving a seat for me next to her. I sat down, looked at her, then at everyone else. Okay, I said, I have made several decisions and I have my own requirements. At this, Rob and Jimbo exchanged high fives again and Will clenched his fist again. I smiled at their enthusiasm and hoped they were ready for what they were getting into. What are your requirements? Teddy asked. I will not lead this group, I said. Of course not, Nick, Teddy said. This is a partnership. We will all make decisions together. I shook my head. It doesn't work that way, Teddy, I said. You guys make decisions and coordinate them with me. But that's all. I don't want to make decisions anymore. I turned to Ethan. This has been a problem with Leadfoot for too long. I felt like the whole world rested on my shoulders and mine alone. It was like I was babysitting a bunch of 2-year-olds. Now it's time for someone to babysit me, okay? Ethan looked at Teddy, who turned to me and spoke. But you want to have a veto on everything. I nodded. This does not mean that I am against democracy. You guys just make decisions and then come back to me to make sure I agree with them, okay? It gives me an opportunity to know what you're thinking and where we're going, an opportunity to maybe change something if it's a bad idea. And I only mean the big decisions, Teddy. I don't care what we have for dinner or where we stay or, within reason, who we hire. Ethan already knows all this shit. I looked at all 4 of them and leaned forward. There aren't most of the rules here, guys. Trust me, if 3 of us start teaming up against the other 2, we won't make it. So everyone must agree on all important decisions anyway. But I don't want to make decisions or even participate in the process anymore, okay? Think of it more as you just keeping me informed after you've made decisions yourself. Teddy looked at the other guys, and they all either shrugged or nodded. Guys, I said, I'm not in a position to make these decisions right now. I have too much going on in my head, so if you want me, these are my terms. Otherwise, we are standard and equal partners in everything. Songwriting is a different topic, of course, but everyone will have a chance at it if you want. That's fine with me, Will said. Rob looked at Jimbo, got his consent, then said, us too. I looked at Teddy. Well, partner, you wanted it, and now you have it. Do you agree? Teddy looked at Jenny, who nodded, albeit thoughtfully. I guess so, he said, his eyes remaining on Jenny. When Monty returned, he had the master agreements prepared for Ethan to submit to our lawyers for review. Columbia agreed to Teddy's terms, and they didn't need to know about my terms. It was just between Ethan and my bandmates. Anyway, in the last 5 days, I've left one of the biggest rock bands and one of the most famous and beautiful wives in the world. Now, before I could catch my breath, I was starting all over again with a new group and a new company. And all this time, only two questions were running through my head. Why did Tara betray me so horribly and apparently for such a long time, and would I ever find happiness again with someone new like Amy? I received an answer to my first question around noon the next day. Teddy and I sat late Sunday night working on two of my songs that he had reworked and now needed a final polish. Around 11 on Monday, Will, Rob, and Jimbo joined us in the barn and began working on arrangements for the first song, When I Get Back. Will was a pleasant surprise in terms of arrangement. He continually offered fresh takes on pacing and arrangements, transforming a slow ballad into rockabilly with dual lead vocals and a shimmering backdrop highlighted by pulsating guitar, driving bass, solid drums, and a complementary piano line. I never imagined this song would be performed like this. Previously, Leadfoot had no piano other than a guest studio musician for one or two songs, and the new arrangement turned out to be much better with the new lineup. Teddy was the first to see her. I was standing with my back to the barn door, watching Jimbo on drums and playing acoustic guitar, when Teddy's guitar line was interrupted by a squeal. I turned to him, laughing, and suddenly all the joy left my heart. "Hi, Nick," Tara said. She looked terrible. I knew from Ethan that the press was actively inflating her scandal. It seemed that the private detective's report was confirmed, and new novels surfaced almost every hour. "What do you want?" I said, my voice sounding harsh. "Guys," Teddy intervened, "let's go inside the house for a while." They got out of there as quickly as they could, Rob and Jimbo keeping their eyes on Tara as they passed. If they play right, they can have her, I thought. When we were alone, I sat down on one of the chairs and waited. I did not hide my anger and contempt for her, and she shifted unsteadily at the entrance to the barn. Then she whispered something, but I didn't hear it. "What?" I asked again. "I asked if you could call the dogs away," she said, tears streaming down her face. It was real, I thought, remembering that she couldn't cry on command. "Just tell them to stop. You've proven your point." "I didn't start this fight," I said, my voice rising. "And now you, who told everyone that I'm cheating, do you dare ask me to do something that you yourself couldn't do for me?" "It wasn't my idea. It was Yanni's," she pleaded, confirming my suspicions that her manager was behind this. "She said you would destroy me if I wasn't proactive." "Nonsense," I barked. "She said you could turn shit into pate, didn't she?" Tara didn't try to deny it. "You were going to leave me," she said. "You cheated on me," I replied. Anger flared through her tears. "Oh, grow up," she hissed. "You knew about it." I was stunned. "How could you think so? Have you never read the tabloids?" she said. "God, they printed almost all the rumors about our novels." "But you denied everything," I replied. I stopped asking, thinking it was just regular shit. She was silent, wiping away tears and looking at the floor. "God, Tara, with Carl? You knew that I didn't suspect anything, right?" She nodded. "So why did you think I knew about the others? You knew I'd be furious. That's why you kept it a secret. So you also knew that I would be furious about the others, right?" She nodded again, no longer trying to make me an indifferent husband. "So how many were there?" I asked. "Does it matter? You know most of them now, or at least Ethan knows. So are they all true?" She nodded. "And that's not it. Is it just most of them?" Her look told me that she realized she had said too much. "Can we survive this, Nick? If I stop, can we survive this?" I laughed, and her pout turned into indignation at the rejection. "Let me ask you a question, Tara. Imagine that every time someone came to your house, they stole something. Not once, but a couple of dozen times. You find out about this, are you going to invite them again?" "These are not our guests, Nick," she shouted. "This is our damn marriage." "Exactly. You stole something much more important than silverware, Tara. You stole my damn self-respect. You destroyed what I thought was perfect. Now I wonder if we even had a marriage. Did you ever love me, or was I just part of a new PR stunt?" This brought on another flood of tears. "You were never a PR stunt," she sobbed. "I loved you from the very first day we met. More than anyone, Nick. You have to believe in it." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "You always loved yourself more than you loved me." Her look told me that I had hit the nail on the head. "So what did you tell me earlier?" she said. "On the phone, it's true, right?" "Yes, Tara," I said, knowing what she was talking about. "I have been faithful to you from day one." She nodded, wiping away her tears again and sniffling. "You're right," she finally said. "I don't deserve you." She laughed. "Damn it, I wouldn't stay married to myself either." She came over and touched my face with her fingertips. "Please, Nick, for old time's sake, can you call the dogs back? And the divorce will be based on a marriage contract, without protracted litigation, without further attacks on me in the press." She smiled and nodded. "I swear." "What about my things from home?" "In my car," she answered, nodding toward the entrance. I nodded, thinking about it. Damn it, I thought. It will end quickly and without hassle. I won't have to go back to Los Angeles, and I'll be done with her in a few strokes of the pen. Best of all, I realize that the events of the last few days have already ruined her image as much as possible, and Carl is now a voice from my past and nothing more. So yeah, maybe I was being gentle with her. But an immediate cessation of hostilities and the ability to move on seemed a small price to pay. "Okay," I said. "The divorce is filed immediately. Irreconcilable differences. And I see the proposed settlement documents before next Monday, and everything is going smoothly. Do you think you can do it?" She hugged me back. "I promise," she said. "You do it, and I will respond to dogs. Do you think you can call them off now?" "The faster I have documents, the faster I will respond, Ethan," I said. She was unhappy, but her look told me that she got more than she expected. "Thank you, Nick," she whispered. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "And Nick?" I looked at her one last time as my wife. "Yes, Tara?" "I'm really sorry," she said, tears welling up in her eyes again. "For all. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I still love you." "I'm sorry too," I said, deciding to call the dogs off now and just restore the whole dirty story if she broke her word. This time she kept her word. The settlement documents were delivered by personal courier the next morning. Here is the complete true story of those crazy 5 days. Carl went bankrupt about 18 months ago. He was forced to sell all those fancy houses and now lives in a smaller house in Malibu. He plays on some studio sessions and can still be seen in the company of some starlets. Vince, our drummer in Leadfoot, has retired from music entirely. He made a series of successful investments, and now he will never have to work a day in his life, if only he keeps track of things. Now he's somewhere in Scotland, painting landscapes and playing golf. We talk every couple of months, and he's expressed some interest in possibly being on our new album. Will has some great ideas for double percussion like the old Allman Brothers band. John Bowman, Leadfoot's guitar virtuoso, is now our producer. He's still going strong, and he works well with Teddy and Will in arranging what are said to be great songs. He produces other bands in both Nashville and Los Angeles. Like Vince, he was tired of touring, and it all worked out well for him. Tara, of course, was fired from the show when ratings plummeted following her divorce. Of course, the divorce went quickly, and of course, I immediately called the dogs off. But the damage had already been done, and the press continued to dig in the mud. She makes cameo appearances, but her reputation has taken a serious hit, and it will be a long time before she becomes America's sweetheart again. It's funny, but Rob eventually started dating her. He told me about it before I read about it somewhere, all embarrassed and worried that I would be angry. I just laughed, especially when he said that they spent the entire evening in bed and she kept asking and talking about me. Rob admitted that he would have lost interest if she weren't so damn beautiful and energetic. Poor Tara. Mustang Ranch, somewhere in Nevada, tried to deceive us by using their registered name, and we decided not to allow such deception, even if they are professionals in this matter. Will was constantly brought to rehearsal for his basset hound, and his name was General Beauregard. We all agreed that it would be a great name for the band. It doesn't matter what they say below the Mason-Dixon line. We are not named after a Confederate general, although the dog may have been. 5 months later, the first album of the group, General Beauregard, was released to rave reviews. This album, Another Happy Face, features the real General Beauregard on the cover, eventually sold 8 million copies and spawned 2 number 1 singles on the rock charts and 3 top 10s on the country charts. Our next album, Saturday Night Drive-In, released with the start of our first big tour, surpassed the first and went platinum, selling 11 million copies in less than a year. The tour sold out before we played the first show, and the reviews for it were, if possible, better than the reviews for the albums. Teddy seems to be handling it all quite well. He takes Jenny and the girls on tour, and they travel in his bus. I sometimes join them to work on songs, but we rarely get anything done with the noise all the kids make. Children? Well, Teddy has little girls, plus there's Brighton and Walter to count. Walter, as you all know from the huge cover in People, was born 10 months ago to Nick and Amy Harlan, a small-town boy who made it big, and his beautiful high school sweetheart. That's what they said in the article, but now you know it was just bullshit that Ethan and the PR guys came up with. The real story was a little more drawn out. In fact, it was almost 8 months after that weekend before Amy agreed to go on a date, and several more months passed before she finally accepted the proposal I'd made on every date since the very first. She agreed, proving to me that the rumors about quiet and reserved girls are absolutely true, and since then she has spent almost every free minute trying to please me as much as possible. I'm not over it yet, and I hope she keeps coming up with new ways to keep me on my toes. We live in a house not far from the home of Teddy and Jenny and their girls. We've managed to maintain a relative sense of normalcy in Grand City, where everyone has known us for most of our lives and doesn't care how much we make. And Walter? Well, I'll leave that for another day and another story. Just know that he has forgiven me and says hi to you all. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.